I built an empire, but I couldn't build a life worth living. Evelyn Cross stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse, watching the city lights blur through unshed tears. At 42, she had everything, except the one thing money couldn't buy. No one wanted to date the woman who terrified boardrooms and commanded billions. Across town, Ryan Hale sat in darkness, his daughter asleep in the next room, staring at a final notice that could end everything they had left. Two broken people. One impossible connection. A love story that begins where most end. Stay with me until the end. Like this video and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The silence in Evelyn Cross's office was the kind that cost $7 million a year to maintain. It wasn't the absence of sound. Manhattan never truly slept, and 43 floors below, the city hummed with its relentless pulse. But up here, in this glass tower that bore her name, the quiet was deliberate, curated, a barrier between the woman the world saw and the one who existed in the spaces between meetings. Evelyn stood at her desk, bathed in the cold glow of 3 monitors, her fingers hovering over a keyboard that had long since stopped feeling like a tool and started feeling like a shield. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Most of her employees had left hours ago, returning to apartments and houses where people waited for them, where someone asked about their day, where the sound of a key in a lock meant welcome home instead of just, you're here again. She pressed send on an email to the London office, watched the confirmation flash across her screen, and felt absolutely nothing. That was the thing about building an empire. You got very good at not feeling. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant, Marcus, who apparently never slept either. Board presentation ready for 6 a.m. review, going home. You should too. Evelyn smiled faintly. Marcus had been with her for 8 years, long enough to know that suggesting she go home was more ritual than expectation. She typed back, good work. See you at 5:30. She set the phone down and caught her reflection in the darkened window. 42 years old. Sharp cheekbones that photographers loved and boardroom opponents learned to fear. Dark hair pulled back in a style that one fashion magazine had called severely elegant. Eyes that had been described as intelligent, penetrating, cold. No one had ever called them warm. Evelyn turned away from her reflection and walked to the bar cart in the corner, another affectation of wealth that felt more like set dressing than something she actually used. She poured 2 fingers of scotch, single malt, older than some of her junior executives. The burn was familiar. Grounding. Her phone buzzed again. Not Marcus this time. You coming to Rebecca's engagement party Saturday? Jennifer Evelyn stared at the message, feeling that old familiar tightness in her chest. Rebecca from Stanford. Another wedding. Another reminder that while Evelyn had been building cross technologies from a startup in her garage to a Fortune 500 company, her friends had been building something else entirely. Lives, families, futures that included someone else. She started typing. Congratulations to Rebecca. I have a conflict. Delete. Would love to, but traveling for... Delete. The truth was simpler and infinitely more complicated. She couldn't bear to go. Couldn't stand another evening of well-meaning questions about her love life, followed by that particular silence when she deflected. The silence that said, we're worried about you and you're too much in the same breath. She settled on, send her my love, schedule won't allow it. The lie tasted worse than the scotch. Evelyn walked back to the window, pressing her palm against the glass. It was cool beneath her touch, a reminder that for all the warmth her company generated, jobs, innovation, purpose, her own world remained relentlessly cold. No one wants to date me, she whispered to her reflection. The words hung in the air, shocking in their honesty. She never said them aloud, never admitted that the brilliant, formidable Evelyn Cross, the woman who had revolutionized cloud security, who had been featured on magazine covers, who had given keynotes to audiences of thousands, went home alone every single night. Men were intimidated by her success or attracted to it for the wrong reasons. The few who made it past the first date inevitably revealed themselves. They wanted the trophy, not the person. They wanted Evelyn Cross, CEO, not Evelyn, the woman who still cried during sentimental commercials and who kept a box of old photographs she was too afraid to look at. And after what she'd been through, after the scars she carried both visible and invisible, The idea of being vulnerable again felt impossible. Her phone rang, shattering the moment. The board chair calling from Tokyo. "Evelyn Cross," she answered, and just like that, the armor was back in place. Okay. Across the city, in a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered more than they shone, Ryan Hale was learning that pride was an expensive luxury he could no longer afford. The envelope sat on the kitchen table, red letters screaming across white paper. Final notice. Ryan stared at it, his daughter's half-finished homework pushed to the side, a glass of water he'd poured an hour ago growing warm beside his clenched fist. 60 days. That's how long they had before the bank took the small two-bedroom house that was the only home Sophie had ever known. He picked up the envelope, as if the weight of it might have changed since he'd opened it 3 hours ago. It hadn't. The number was still the same. Still impossible. "Daddy?" Ryan's head snapped up. Sophie stood in the doorway of the kitchen, 7 years old and wearing the unicorn pajamas that were getting too small, but that she refused to give up. Her dark curls, her mother's curls, framed a face that could still undo him with a single look. "Hey, sweetheart." He quickly folded the notice and slid it under a stack of bills. "What are you doing up? It's past bedtime." "I heard you," she said softly, padding into the kitchen in her bare feet. "You sounded sad." Ryan's chest tightened. He'd been trying so hard to keep it together, to shield her from the reality of their situation. But kids knew. They always knew. "Come here," he said, opening his arms. Sophie climbed into his lap, fitting perfectly against his chest the way she had since she was born. He breathed in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and felt the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. "I'm okay, Soph," he lied gently. "Just grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about money?" His heart cracked a little. "Why would you think that?" "Because you look the same way Mommy used to look when she was worried about money." Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact, the observation of a child who'd grown up too fast. "Before she got sick." Ryan closed his eyes. 3 years. It had been 3 years since Emma died, and sometimes it felt like yesterday, and sometimes it felt like a lifetime ago. She'd fought so hard, through the diagnosis, the treatments, the medical bills that had drained their savings, and then some. And in the end, she'd left him with Sophie and a mountain of debt and a promise to take care of their little girl. He was failing at that promise. "We're going to be okay," he said, willing it to be true. "I have an interview tomorrow. A really good one." Sophie pulled back to look at him, her brown eyes, also her mother's, searching his face. "What kind of interview?" "It's at a big company, Cross Technologies. You know, the one with the logo that looks like a shield?" She nodded seriously. "They make computer stuff." "Yeah, they do. And if I get this job, it means steady work. It means—" He swallowed hard. "It means we get to stay in our house." Understanding flickered across Sophie's face, and Ryan hated that she had to understand things like this at 7 years old. She should be worried about math homework and playground drama, not whether they'd have a roof over their heads. "You'll get it," Sophie said with the absolute confidence that only children possess. "You're really smart, Daddy." "Thanks, baby." He kissed the top of her head. "Now come on, let's get you back to bed." He carried her to her room, tucked her under the covers with the worn stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. Sophie's room was small, but he'd tried to make it special, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that Emma had put up, a bookshelf he'd built himself, drawings and school projects covering every available surface. "Daddy?" Sophie said as he turned off the light. "Yeah?" "I said a wish tonight. That you get the job." Ryan's throat tightened. "That's a good wish. And I wish that you wouldn't be lonely anymore." He froze in the doorway. "What?" But Sophie's breathing had already evened out, her face relaxing into sleep the way children could, unburdened by the weight of their own observations. Ryan stood there for a long moment, watching his daughter sleep, and felt the crushing loneliness she'd named settling over him like a familiar coat. She was right. He was lonely, desperately, achingly lonely, in a way that had nothing to do with the empty bed or the silent house, and everything to do with carrying the weight of their survival entirely alone. He'd stopped dating after Emma died. It felt wrong, disloyal somehow, even though Emma herself had made him promise not to spend the rest of his life alone. But between grief and single parenthood and the slow disintegration of his freelance writing career, there hadn't been time for anything else. His world had narrowed to Sophie and survival, and somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be anything other than tired. Ryan walked back to the kitchen and stared at the stack of bills. The final notice glared up at him from where he'd tried to hide it. Tomorrow's interview was with Cross Technologies, one of the biggest tech companies in the country. The position was for a senior content strategist, writing, managing communications, developing narrative frameworks for their brand. It was perfect for his skill set if he could convince them to look past the 3-year gap in his resume. If he could explain why a former investigative journalist was applying for corporate work. If he could make them see that he was worth taking a chance on. He pulled out his laptop and opened the file he'd been working on for weeks. Interview prep. He'd researched the company until he could recite their quarterly earnings from memory. He'd studied their brand voice, analyzed their competitors, prepared answers to every possible question. But there was one thing he couldn't prepare for, one variable he couldn't control, whether he'd be enough. His phone buzzed, a text from his brother David. "Good luck tomorrow. You've got this." Ryan typed back, "Thanks. Need all the luck I can get." David, "You'll kill it. And hey, when you're running that place, remember the little people." Despite everything, Ryan smiled. David had always believed in him, even when Ryan's own faith wavered. Even when the manuscript he'd been working on for 2 years got rejected by every publisher in New York. Even when Emma died and Ryan's entire world collapsed. He closed the laptop and walked through the house, checking locks and turning off lights. The house was small, but it was theirs. Sophie had taken her first steps in the living room. Emma had painted the kitchen cabinets a cheerful yellow one weekend, laughing when she got more paint on herself than the wood. Every corner held a memory, a piece of the life they'd built together, and he was about to lose it. Ryan stood in his bedroom, their bedroom, though he still couldn't think of it as just his, and stared at the empty side of the bed. Emma's nightstand still held a half-read book, a tube of chapstick, a photograph of the 3 of them at the beach. "I'm trying, Em," he whispered to the darkness. "I'm really trying." The silence didn't answer back. He set his alarm for 5 a.m., laid out his interview clothes, the one good suit he owned, pressed until the creases were sharp enough to cut, and tried to sleep. Instead, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, calculating and recalculating the impossible math of their situation. If he got the job, if the salary was what the posting indicated, if he could negotiate a signing bonus, if, at 2:37 a.m., he finally drifted off, his dreams tangled with worry and hope in equal measure. Evelyn woke at 4:30 a.m. without an alarm, a habit so ingrained that her body knew before her mind that another day had begun. She moved through her morning routine with mechanical precision. Shower, skincare, coffee from the built-in espresso machine that cost more than most people's cars, the business news streaming on every screen. She dressed in a slate gray suit, silk blouse, heels that added 3 inches to her 5'7" frame. Armor, all of it. The presentation was flawless. The board members nodded, asked predictable questions, approved the European expansion with minimal pushback. Evelyn fielded it all with the easy competence of someone who'd been doing this for 2 decades. "Excellent work, Evelyn," the chair said as the meeting concluded. "Though I have to say, you look tired. When's the last time you took a vacation?" "I took a long weekend last year," she replied smoothly. 18 months ago, Marcus whispered beside her. The chair laughed. "You're going to burn out. And then where will we be?" "I'm fine," Evelyn said in the tone that indicated the subject was closed. But as she rode the elevator back down to her office, she caught her reflection in the polished doors and wondered if he was right. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a year ago, a tightness to her mouth that no amount of expensive moisturizer could smooth. She looked successful, powerful, untouchable. She looked exhausted. The elevator stopped on the 27th floor. The doors opened to reveal a small crowd waiting, employees heading to their various departments. They saw her and a visible ripple went through the group. People straightened, smiles became professional, the easy chatter died. This was what Evelyn did. She walked into rooms and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. She nodded politely and moved to the back corner of the elevator, watching the numbers descend. No one spoke to her. No one even looked at her directly. She might as well have been surrounded by an invisible force field. This was loneliness too, she realized. Not the quiet of an empty penthouse, but the isolation of being constantly surrounded by people who saw you as a position, not a person. The elevator reached the executive floor. Evelyn stepped out, and the moment she was gone, she heard the relief in the resumed conversations behind her. Marcus was waiting in her office with a schedule that would have made a presidential campaign manager weep. Back-to-back meetings until 7 p.m., a working dinner with investors, then preparation for tomorrow's keynote. Also, Marcus said, pulling up something on his tablet, we have final interviews for the content strategist position at 3. I've narrowed it down to 3 candidates. Evelyn nodded, already reading the briefs. The former journalist? Ryan Hale. Strong portfolio, excellent recommendations, but there's a gap in his employment history. How long? 3 years. His wife died. He's been doing freelance work, but nothing steady. Evelyn looked up sharply. He's been raising a child alone? A daughter, 7 years old. Something shifted in Evelyn's chest. She knew about loss, about the way it could derail an entire life. Keep him in the running. I want to meet him. Marcus made a note. The interview is scheduled for 3. I'll have them send him up. The morning blurred into afternoon, one meeting bleeding into the next. Evelyn negotiated contracts, approved budgets, made decisions that would affect thousands of lives. She was brilliant at it, the way some people were brilliant at music or mathematics. This was her language, her art form. But as 3 o'clock approached, she found herself curious about the candidate with the gap in his resume. The man who'd lost his wife and somehow kept going. She understood that kind of survival. At 2:47 p.m., her assistant called. Ms. Cross, there's been an incident with one of the interview candidates. Evelyn frowned. What kind of incident? Apparently there was an accident in the elevator, a coffee spill. The candidate, Mr. Hale, his shirt is ruined. He's asking if we can reschedule. Evelyn checked her watch. She had exactly 30 minutes before her next meeting, and the rest of the day was packed solid. Rescheduling would push his interview back by at least a week, and they needed to fill this position soon. She made a decision that surprised herself. Which elevator bank? West Side, ma'am. Tell him to wait. I'm coming down. Marcus looked up in surprise as she stood. You're going down to the 27th floor for an interview candidate? I'm going to see if we can salvage this, Evelyn said, already moving toward the door. Reschedule my 3 o'clock by 15 minutes. She took the express elevator down, her mind already running through the practical solutions. The 27th floor housed several departments, including marketing, which meant there had to be, yes, there it was, a small storage closet that the marketing team used for promotional materials and emergency supplies. The elevator doors opened to a scene of minor chaos. A maintenance crew was cleaning up what looked like an entire coffee pot's worth of liquid. And standing off to the side, looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole, was a man in his mid-30s holding a ruined white shirt away from his body. Ryan Hale, Evelyn presumed. He was tall, she noticed, with dark hair that was slightly too long and needed a trim, broad shoulders that filled out his suit jacket in a way that suggested he hadn't always worked behind a desk. But it was his face that caught her attention, the exhaustion in his eyes, the set of his jaw that spoke of someone holding themselves together through sheer force of will. She recognized that expression. She saw it in her mirror every morning. Mr. Hale, she said, walking toward him. He turned, and for a moment their eyes met. His were brown, she noticed, and currently filled with profound embarrassment. Yes, I'm so sorry. I know I'm supposed to be. He stopped mid-sentence, recognition flickering across his face. You're Evelyn Cross. I am. She glanced at the coffee-stained shirt. That looks like quite a disaster. The elevator lurched. The guy next to me. Ryan shook his head. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry to waste your time. I can come back another day. Or, Evelyn said, already running through the logistics. We can solve this problem in the next 5 minutes and still make your interview time. She walked to the storage closet and opened it, scanning the contents with practiced efficiency. Marketing kept emergency supplies for trade shows and events, which meant, there, a stack of company polo shirts in various sizes. She pulled out two, held them up to assess, selected the larger one. This should fit. Ryan stared at her like she'd just performed a magic trick. You're giving me a shirt? I'm lending you a shirt. You can return it after the interview. She held it out to him. The bathroom is down that hall to the left. You have 4 minutes. He took the shirt, his fingers brushing hers for a brief moment. Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You still have to earn the job. Something sparked in his eyes. Not gratitude, but determination. Good. She didn't want someone who would coast on sympathy. Ryan disappeared into the bathroom. Evelyn checked her phone, responding to 3 urgent emails while she waited. Marcus had rescheduled her next meeting, but she only had a narrow window before the afternoon completely imploded. Ryan emerged exactly 3 minutes later wearing the polo shirt that, while not exactly professional, was at least clean and fit him well. Better than well, actually. The shirt highlighted the athletic build beneath, the way his shoulders. Evelyn shut down that train of thought immediately. Better? She said crisply. The interview room is on the executive floor. I'll walk you to the elevator. They moved through the corridor together, and Evelyn was aware of the stares from employees who'd probably never seen her on this floor, much less walking alongside an interview candidate. I'm not usually this much of a disaster, Ryan said as they waited for the elevator. I promise. Everyone has bad days, Evelyn replied. The question is whether you can adapt when things don't go according to plan. I've had a lot of practice at that lately. There was a weight to those words, a depth of experience that made Evelyn curious despite herself. She wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to know his story beyond the bullet points on his resume. But the elevator arrived and she had exactly 12 minutes before her next meeting. Good luck, Mr. Hale, she said as he stepped inside. Thank you, Ms. Cross, for the shirt and for... He gestured vaguely, encompassing the entire strange encounter. For letting you interview in borrowed clothes? A small smile tugged at her lips. Let's see if you still thank me after you meet our interview panel. The doors closed on his surprised expression, and Evelyn turned back toward the executive elevator, already mentally shifting gears to her next meeting. She didn't think about Ryan Hale again for the rest of the afternoon. At least, that's what she told herself. Yet, Ryan sat across from the interview panel and tried to channel every ounce of confidence he didn't actually feel. The room was intimidating, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, a glass conference table that probably cost more than his car, 3 senior executives whose combined experience could fill an encyclopedia. But Evelyn Cross wasn't among them, and Ryan wasn't sure if that was a relief or a disappointment. The interview itself was brutal in the way that only high-stakes corporate interviews could be. They asked about his background, his experience, the gap in his resume that loomed like a chasm on the page. 3 years is a significant break from traditional employment, said Patricia Nguyen, the chief operating officer. What have you been doing during that time? Ryan had prepared for this question, had rehearsed the answer until it sounded natural rather than defensive. I've been freelancing while raising my daughter, he said evenly. After my wife passed away, I needed flexibility that traditional employment couldn't offer, but I've stayed current in my field. I've written for several major publications, managed content strategy for 3 startups, and developed my skills in digital marketing and brand development. I'm sorry for your loss, Patricia said, and she sounded like she meant it. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was, but it also taught me about resilience and adaptation, skills I think are valuable in any position. They moved on to technical questions, scenarios, challenges. Ryan answered them all, drawing on years of experience and the desperation that came from knowing this might be his last chance. And somewhere in the middle of explaining his approach to brand narrative frameworks, he forgot to be nervous. This was what he was good at, finding the story, shaping the message, connecting with an audience. He'd done it as a journalist, uncovering truths and presenting them in ways that made people care. He could do it for a company too. By the time the interview ended 90 minutes later, Ryan felt cautiously hopeful. We'll be making our decision by the end of the week, said James Chen, the VP of Communications. Thank you for coming in and for being so flexible about the circumstances. Ryan shook hands with each of them, gathered his things, and headed for the elevator. It was only when the doors closed and he was alone that he allowed himself to breathe. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. Whether he got the job or not, he'd shown up and given it everything he had. The elevator descended and Ryan caught his reflection in the polished doors. He was wearing a borrowed shirt from a company he didn't work for, a shirt that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and something else, something that reminded him of the woman who'd handed it to him with such matter-of-fact efficiency. Evelyn Cross had helped him. The CEO of a billion-dollar company had taken time out of her day to solve a problem for a complete stranger who'd spilled coffee all over himself. That kindness stuck with him on the subway ride home, as he picked Sophie up from after-school care, as he made dinner and helped with homework and went through the familiar evening routine. "How was your interview, Daddy?" Sophie asked as he tucked her into bed. "It was good, sweetheart, really good." "Did you wear your fancy suit?" Ryan smiled. "I wore my fancy suit and a borrowed shirt." "A borrowed shirt?" "Long story. I'll tell you if I get the job." Sophie nodded seriously. "You'll get it. I just know you will." Ryan kissed her forehead. "Sleep tight, Soph." But as he walked back to his own room, the optimism began to fade. 3 candidates, Patricia had said, which meant there were 2 other people competing for the same lifeline he desperately needed. People who probably hadn't taken 3 years off. People who hadn't shown up to their interview in a borrowed polo shirt. The final notice was still on the kitchen table. The number hadn't changed. The deadline hadn't extended. Ryan sat down and put his head in his hands. He'd done everything right. Prepared, performed, presented himself as the best possible candidate. But would it be enough? 3 days later, Evelyn sat in her office reviewing the feedback from the interview panel. All 3 candidates were strong. All 3 could do the job. But there was something about Ryan Hale's interview that kept drawing her attention back to his file. He was the strongest communicator, James noted in his written feedback. Natural storyteller, understands how to connect emotionally with an audience without being manipulative about it. Patricia had written, "Overqualified if anything, but I think he'd bring a fresh perspective. The career gap is a concern, but his freelance work shows he's been staying sharp." The third panelist had been less enthusiastic, noting concerns about reliability and whether someone who'd been out of the traditional workplace could adapt to corporate culture. Evelyn read through Ryan's portfolio again, investigative pieces that had won awards, brand campaigns that had driven real results, writing that was clear and compelling without being flashy. And then she read the personal statement he'd included with his application, a single paragraph that most candidates probably didn't bother with. "I spent 10 years asking questions and finding truth as a journalist. Then I spent 3 years learning what matters when everything else falls away. I'm ready to bring both of those experiences to work that makes a difference. I'm ready to build something that lasts." Evelyn closed the file and stared out at the city skyline. She thought about the man who'd stood in a coffee-stained shirt, embarrassed but not defeated, who'd adapted to an impossible situation and still delivered a strong interview, who'd lost everything and somehow kept going. She thought about what he'd said in the elevator. "I've had a lot of practice at adapting when things don't go according to plan." She knew something about that too. Evelyn picked up her phone and called James directly. "The content strategist position. I want to make an offer to Ryan Hale." Well, there was a pause on the other end. "Not the candidate from Stanford?" "Ryan Hale," Evelyn repeated. "Make the offer competitive. And James, make sure he knows the decision was based on merit, not sympathy." "Understood." Evelyn hung up and turned back to her computer, already moving on to the next decision, the next problem, the next demand on her time. But in a quiet corner of her mind, she wondered about the man who was about to get a second chance. She wondered if he knew how to take it. Ryan was making breakfast when his phone rang with an unknown number. His hands were covered in pancake batter. Sophie was asking for chocolate chips. And for a moment he considered letting it go to voicemail. But something made him wipe his hands on a dish towel and answer. "Mr. Hale? This is James Chen from Cross Technologies." Ryan's heart stopped. Sophie looked up at him, her eyes wide with understanding beyond her years. "Yes, hello," Ryan managed, his voice surprisingly steady. "We'd like to offer you the position of Senior Content Strategist. The compensation package is being sent to your email now, and we'd like you to start Monday, if possible." The kitchen seemed to tilt slightly. Ryan gripped the counter. Yes, I accept. Excellent. Welcome to Cross Technologies, Ryan. The call ended and Ryan stood there, phone in hand, staring at nothing while Sophie tugged on his shirt. Daddy, did you get the job? He looked down at his daughter, at her hopeful face, and felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, but opening, letting light in for the first time in years. Yeah, Soph, I got the job. She threw her arms around his waist, and Ryan held her tight, feeling the weight of 3 years of struggle begin to lift. Not disappear. He was too practical to think one job solved everything. But lift enough that he could breathe. They could keep the house. He could pay the bills. Sophie could stay in her school, keep her friends, keep the life they'd fought so hard to maintain. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ryan sat at the kitchen table and opened the email with the compensation package. The salary was more than he'd hoped for, more than he'd earned even in his best years as a journalist. There was health insurance, good health insurance, retirement benefits, a signing bonus that would cover the mortgage arrears and leave enough to rebuild their emergency fund. He read through it 3 times, waiting for the catch, the fine print, the thing that would make it all evaporate like a dream. But it was real. Ryan pulled out his phone and texted his brother. Got the job. David's response was immediate. Knew it. Told you. When do you start? Monday. That's my brother. Proud of you, man. Ryan stared at the words and felt the sting of tears. He'd been holding it together for so long, being strong for Sophie, pretending everything was fine even when it wasn't. And now, finally, maybe it actually would be. He walked to Emma's photograph on the mantel, the one from their wedding day where she was laughing at something he'd said, her whole face lit up with joy. We're going to be okay, he whispered. I'm going to take care of her. I promise. The photograph didn't answer, but Ryan felt something settle in his chest anyway. A sense that maybe, just maybe, he was finally moving forward instead of just surviving. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made Manhattan look like a postcard. Ryan dropped Sophie at school, ignoring her repeated reminders to be yourself and don't be nervous, delivered with the solemn authority of a 7-year-old life coach. The Cross Technologies building looked even more intimidating in the morning light. Ryan took a breath, adjusted his tie, a new one, purchased with money he didn't quite have yet but would soon, and walked through the glass doors. The next 3 hours were a blur of orientation, paperwork, introductions to people whose names he'd never remember, and a tour of the sprawling office complex. His desk was in the content department on the 31st floor, a glass-walled space with a view of the city that still felt surreal. Ryan Hale? He turned to find a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an efficient demeanor. I'm Patricia Nguyen. We met during your interview. Of course, Miss Nguyen. Thank you again for the opportunity. It's Patricia, please. And you earned this position on your own merit. I want that to be clear. She handed him a tablet. This is your first assignment. We're launching a new security protocol in 3 months, and we need a complete content strategy, web copy, press releases, internal communications, the works. James will fill you in on the details, but I wanted to personally welcome you. I appreciate that. Patricia studied him for a moment. You're going to do well here, Ryan. I have a good feeling about it. After she left, Ryan sat at his desk and opened the files she'd sent. The project was massive, exactly the kind of complex, high-stakes work he'd been craving. He dove in, and for the first time in 3 years felt the pure satisfaction of doing what he was actually good at. The day flew by. He met his team, 3 other content strategists and a junior writer fresh out of college. They were smart, driven, and mercifully normal. No one treated him like the charity case he'd feared becoming. They just wanted to know if he could do the job. He could. By 5 o'clock, Ryan had outlined a preliminary strategy, identified 3 potential angles for the campaign, and scheduled follow-up meetings with the security team. He was gathering his things, already mentally shifting to dad mode for Sophie pickup, when someone knocked on his office door. He looked up and froze. Evelyn Cross stood in the doorway, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than his first car, her expression unreadable. Mr. Hale? I heard it was your first day. Ryan stood quickly, nearly knocking his coffee over. Miss Cross? Yes, it is. Thank you for... I wanted to thank you for the opportunity. You thanked James, I assume. I did, but then your gratitude is appropriately directed. She stepped into his office, glancing at the screens covered in notes and outlines. How's it going so far? Good. Really good. The project Patricia assigned is exactly the kind of challenge I was hoping for. Evelyn's expression softened slightly, though Ryan wouldn't have called it a smile. I'm glad to hear it. And the shirt? Did you return it? It took him a moment to follow. Oh, yes, I left it with reception last week. I had it cleaned. That wasn't necessary. It seemed like the right thing to do. Something flickered in her eyes, too quick to identify. Well, welcome to Cross Technologies. I expect great things from you. She turned to leave and Ryan heard himself say, Miss Cross? She paused. Thank you. Not just for the job, but for... He gestured vaguely, trying to capture the moment in the hallway, the borrowed shirt, the simple kindness that had somehow mattered more than she probably realized. For seeing past the coffee disaster. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Everyone deserves a second chance, Mr. Hale. Don't waste yours. Then she was gone, leaving Ryan standing in his office, wondering why his heart was beating faster than the situation warranted. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Ryan threw himself into work with an intensity that surprised his new colleagues. He stayed late when Sophie was at her grandmother's house, came in early when she had morning activities, and somehow managed to deliver work that exceeded expectations. The signing bonus had saved the house. The regular paychecks were rebuilding their savings. Sophie had stopped asking worried questions about money and started talking about things like birthday parties and summer camp. They were going to be okay. But as October faded into November, Ryan began to notice something else, something he hadn't expected. He saw Evelyn Cross everywhere. Not in a stalking way. Cross Technologies was her company, and her presence was felt in every department. But Ryan found himself acutely aware of when she was in the building, when she passed through their floor, when she stopped to talk to his boss or review their projects. She never singled him out, never gave him special attention or treatment. But sometimes, late at night when Ryan was one of the few people left in the office, he'd see her light on in the executive suite. Sometimes he'd pass her in the hallway and she'd nod, that same unreadable expression on her face. Sometimes he wondered what she was thinking. You're staring at the elevator, his colleague Marcus said one evening, making Ryan jump. What? No, You've been watching that elevator for 5 minutes. Either you're expecting someone or you've developed a really boring obsession. Ryan laughed, feeling caught. Just tired. Long day. Marcus studied him with knowing eyes. You know she works until midnight most nights, right, Miss Cross? If you're trying to run into her, you're going to be here a while. I'm not trying to run into anyone, Ryan said, but he felt heat creep up his neck. Sure. And I don't notice when the attractive new CFO walks past my desk. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Go home, man. Get some sleep. The company will still be here tomorrow. Ryan took the advice, but as he rode the elevator down, he couldn't help glancing at the numbers as they passed the executive floor. The light was on. Of course it was. November turned cold. Ryan settled into his role, earning respect from his team and praise from Patricia. The security protocol launch was on track, and he'd started getting pulled into other high-profile projects. He was good at this, translating complex technical concepts into compelling narratives, finding the human story in corporate initiatives. Sophie's school had a Thanksgiving celebration. Ryan took the afternoon off to attend, watching his daughter dress as a pilgrim and sing songs about gratitude. She waved at him from the stage, her smile bright enough to light the room, and Ryan felt his chest tighten with love and relief. This was what he'd been fighting for. This moment, this stability, this chance for her to just be a kid. After the program, he was walking back to his car when his phone buzzed. An email from Patricia. Can you stop by my office before you leave today? Need to discuss the Q1 strategy. Ryan checked the time. He could swing by the office, handle whatever Patricia needed, and still make it home in time to start dinner. He texted Sophie's grandmother to pick her up and headed back to Manhattan. The office was quieter in the late afternoon, most of the staff having left early for the holiday. Ryan took the elevator to Patricia's floor and found her in her office, surrounded by strategy documents. Ryan, thanks for coming. I know you were at Sophie's school event. It's fine. What do you need? Patricia gestured to a seat. I've been reviewing the Q1 content calendar, and I think we need to accelerate the personal data privacy campaign, which means I need someone who can handle the complexity and deliver quality under pressure. I can do that. I know you can. That's why you're my first choice. She pulled up a timeline. But I need to be honest, this is going to be intense. Late nights, weekend work in December, constant revisions, and I know you have Sophie to consider. Ryan's mind raced through the logistics. His mother-in-law could help with pickup. Sophie's school had an aftercare program. He could make it work. I want the project, he said firmly. Patricia smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. There's just one thing. Ms. Cross has expressed personal interest in this campaign. She'll want to review everything directly. Something flipped in Ryan's stomach. Ms. Cross will be reviewing my work? Not just reviewing. She'll be actively involved in strategy sessions. This is her pet project. She's passionate about user privacy. You'll be working closely with her. Ryan tried to keep his expression neutral while his pulse kicked up. That's fine. I can handle it. Good. We kick off Monday. I'll send you the brief tonight. Ryan left Patricia's office in a daze. He was going to be working directly with Evelyn Cross, the woman he definitely wasn't thinking about, the woman whose office light he definitely didn't notice burning late into the night. This was fine. This was professional. This was just a project. He kept telling himself that all the way home. The first strategy session was scheduled for Monday afternoon. Ryan prepared obsessively over the weekend, researching every angle of data privacy, studying cross-technology's existing policies, developing 3 different strategic approaches. Sophie noticed his distraction. Daddy, you're working a lot again. Just for a little while, sweetheart. Big project at work. Is it important? Very important. She considered this seriously. Okay, but you should still take breaks. That's what my teacher says. Ryan pulled her into a hug. Your teacher is very smart. Monday arrived with gray skies threatening snow. Ryan dressed carefully. His best suit, the tie Emma had given him for their last anniversary together. Armor of a different kind. The meeting was in the executive conference room, the same one where he'd interviewed months ago. Ryan arrived 10 minutes early and found Patricia already there, along with James and 2 other senior executives, and Evelyn Cross. She sat at the head of the table, reviewing something on her tablet, her focus absolute. She wore black today, severe and elegant, her dark hair pulled back to reveal the sharp intelligence of her face. Ryan took a seat, pulled out his notes, and tried to remember how to breathe normally. Good afternoon, everyone, Evelyn said without preamble. Let's begin. Ryan, Patricia says you've developed some initial strategic approaches. I'd like to hear them. This was it. Ryan stood, connected his laptop to the display, and launched into his presentation. He'd prepared 3 strategies. The safe corporate approach that emphasized compliance and risk mitigation, the aggressive transparency angle that would position cross-technologies as industry leaders, and a third option, the one he actually believed in, that framed privacy as a fundamental human right and cross-technologies as its defender. The room was silent as he spoke. Ryan could feel Evelyn's attention like a physical thing, sharp and assessing. He didn't look at her directly, afraid he'd lose his train of thought. When he finished, there was a long pause. The third approach, Evelyn said finally. The human rights angle. Explain your reasoning. Ryan met her eyes for the first time. They were gray, he noticed, storm cloud gray. Because it's true, he said simply. Your company doesn't just protect data. You protect people's ability to control their own stories, their own information, their own lives. That's not a marketing angle. That's your actual mission. And if we're going to ask the public to trust us, we need to communicate that authentically. Something shifted in Evelyn's expression. Not quite approval, but interest. It's ambitious, James said carefully. It could backfire if we don't deliver on the promise. Then we deliver on the promise, Ryan replied. You've already built the infrastructure. You've already implemented policies that exceed industry standards. We're not inventing a narrative. We're articulating what already exists. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled beneath her chin. What if I told you that's exactly why I started this company? Not to make money, though that certainly happened, but because I believe people deserve to own their own information. Ryan felt something click into place. Then that's the story we tell. Not as corporate messaging, but as truth. The meeting lasted 2 hours. They debated angles, discussed risks, challenged assumptions. And through it all, Ryan felt the exhilaration of doing work that actually mattered, with people who cared about getting it right. As the meeting broke up, Evelyn caught his eye. "Ryan, stay for a moment." His colleagues filed out, Patricia giving him an encouraging nod. Then it was just Ryan and Evelyn in the large conference room, the Manhattan skyline spread out behind her like a painting. "Your presentation was excellent," she said. "Thank you." "I'm not offering a compliment. I'm stating a fact." She stood, walking to the window. "I don't usually involve myself in individual campaigns, but this one matters to me." Patricia mentioned that. "Did she mention why?" Ryan shook his head. Evelyn was silent for a long moment, her profile sharp against the gray sky. 10 years ago, I had cancer. Ovarian cancer, aggressive and invasive. During treatment, I discovered that my medical records had been compromised, sold to pharmaceutical companies, insurance brokers, data aggregators. My private health information, my vulnerabilities, turned into commodities. Ryan felt his chest tighten. That's unconscionable. It's also perfectly legal in many cases. That's when I realized that privacy isn't just a nice idea. It's a form of protection, of dignity. She turned to face him. "So when I say this campaign matters to me, I mean it literally shaped the direction of my company, of my life." "I understand," Ryan said quietly. "Do you?" Evelyn's gaze was penetrating. "Because I need to know that whoever leads this campaign understands it's not just marketing, it's personal." Ryan thought about Emma's medical records, the bills that had piled up, the way her illness had become a matter of public record in ways that had felt like violation. "I do understand. More than you know." Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition of shared experience, of understanding what it meant to have your private pain become public knowledge. "Good," Evelyn said. "Then let's make this campaign something that actually changes the conversation." Over the next 3 weeks, Ryan saw more of Evelyn Cross than he'd ever expected. She attended every strategy session, challenged every assumption, pushed for authenticity over polish. She was demanding, precise, and absolutely unwilling to accept anything less than excellence. She was also, Ryan discovered, surprisingly human. During one late-night session, someone made a joke about terrible corporate jargon, and Evelyn laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and genuine. Ryan found himself staring, caught off guard by the transformation it brought to her face. During another meeting, she listened to the junior writer's nervous suggestion and said, "That's actually brilliant. Let's develop that." The kid nearly fell out of his chair with relief. And one evening, when Ryan was working late trying to crack a particularly difficult messaging problem, he looked up to find Evelyn standing in his office doorway. "Still here?" she asked. "Could ask you the same thing." "Fair point." She glanced at his screens. "The privacy as empowerment angle? It's not working. It feels manipulative, like we're using emotion to distract from substance." Evelyn walked into his office, studying his notes. "What if you're approaching it backwards?" "What do you mean?" "You're trying to make privacy emotional. But privacy is already emotional. It's about control, autonomy, the right to define your own boundaries. That's inherently personal." She pointed to a line in his draft. "Here, you're trying to convince people they should care. Instead, acknowledge that they already do. Everyone has something they want to keep private. Everyone has a boundary they don't want crossed." Ryan stared at the screen, then at Evelyn. "That's it. That's exactly it." "Write that," she said. "Write the truth." She left him there, and Ryan worked for another 2 hours, the words finally flowing like they were supposed to. When he finished, it was past 11, and the office was empty except for the cleaning crew, and the light in Evelyn's office, still burning bright. Ryan saved his work, gathered his things, and on impulse took the elevator up to the executive floor. Her door was open. Evelyn sat at her desk, surrounded by documents, her jacket discarded and her sleeves rolled up. She looked tired in a way that made her seem more real, less like the untouchable CEO and more like someone who carried the weight of 1,000 responsibilities. "You're still here," Ryan said from the doorway. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "So are you." I finished the draft. The one you helped me crack. I didn't help. I just asked a question. The right question. Ryan hesitated, then stepped into her office. Can I ask you something? Evelyn leaned back in her chair, studying him. Go ahead. Do you ever go home? For a moment, he thought he'd overstepped. Then something shifted in her expression, not anger, but something sadder. Eventually, she said quietly. That's not really an answer. No, it's not. She stood, walking to her window. The city stretched out below them, millions of lights representing millions of lives. Do you know what it's like to build something from nothing? To pour everything you have into creating something that matters? I was married, Ryan said. So yes. Evelyn glanced at him, and for the first time since they'd met, her armor seemed to crack. Then you understand. This company, it's not just my job. It's proof that I exist, that I matter, that I can create something lasting. You know you can matter without working yourself to death, right? Can I? The question was barely a whisper, because in my experience, the moment I stopped being exceptional, I stopped being seen at all. Ryan understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. The constant pressure to prove yourself, to justify your existence through achievement. He'd felt it after Emma died. The desperate need to be a perfect father, because if he failed at that too, what would be left? Sophie's teacher told her that rest is part of the work, Ryan said. That if you don't take breaks, the quality suffers. That shout does. Sophie is 7. And somehow wiser than both of us. Evelyn's lips quirked in something almost like a smile. You should go home to her. You should go home too, wherever that is. An empty penthouse in Tribeca. The words hung in the air, honest and raw. Ryan felt something shift between them, a recognition of their parallel loneliness. Empty houses are terrible, he said quietly. Trust me. At least yours has someone waiting for you. Technically, she's asleep by now. My mother-in-law is staying over. Ryan pulled out his phone, showing Evelyn a picture. Sophie, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, holding up a drawing of a rainbow. This is what I'm going home to. Evelyn studied the photo, and something in her expression softened. She's beautiful. She's everything. You're lucky. I know. They stood there in the quiet of her office, the city humming below them, two people who'd learned that success and loneliness weren't mutually exclusive. Go home, Ryan, Evelyn said finally. Get some rest. We have a lot of work ahead. Ryan nodded, but paused at the door. You should rest too. The campaign will still be here tomorrow. Will it be as good tomorrow? Maybe better. Fresh eyes, clear mind, all that. Evelyn shook her head, but there was something almost fond in her expression. Good night, Ryan. Good night, Ms. Cross. It's Evelyn, she said. When it's just us? It's Evelyn. Ryan felt his heart do something complicated. Good night, Evelyn. He left her there, but as he rode the elevator down, he couldn't shake the image of her standing alone in that office, surrounded by success and utterly isolated. The campaign consumed December. Long hours, endless revisions, strategy sessions that pushed them all to their limits. But something was building, not just the campaign, but a team dynamic that felt different, better, like they were actually working towards something that mattered. And through it all, Ryan and Evelyn kept finding themselves in late-night conversations, moments stolen between meetings when the rest of the office had emptied out. She told him about growing up poor in Seattle, about coding her first program at 12 on a library computer, about the sexism she'd faced in tech, the investors who'd dismissed her, the satisfaction of proving them all wrong. He told her about journalism, about the thrill of uncovering truth, about the story that had nearly won him a Pulitzer, about Emma, carefully, and how love and loss had reshaped his entire world. They didn't acknowledge what was happening, didn't name the way their conversations grew longer, more personal, more essential. It was easier to pretend it was just collegiality, just two people working together. But Ryan knew better. He'd catch himself thinking about Evelyn at odd moments, wondering what she'd think about something Sophie said, finding excuses to walk past her office, looking forward to their late-night strategy sessions with an anticipation that had nothing to do with work. He was in trouble, and he had no idea what to do about it. The breakthrough came on a Friday evening, 3 days before Christmas. The office had cleared out early, people rushing home to start their holidays. Ryan should have left too. Sophie's winter concert was in 2 hours and he'd promised to be there early. But the final campaign deck wasn't finished, and Evelyn was still in her office, and somehow Ryan found himself staying. He was deep in revisions when he heard footsteps. Evelyn appeared in his doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Peace offering," she said. "I know I've been pushing everyone hard." Ryan accepted the cup, surprised by the gesture. "It's worth it. The campaign is going to be incredible." "It is." Evelyn leaned against his desk, a casual gesture he'd never seen from her before. "You've done exceptional work, Ryan. I wanted you to know that. Just doing my job." "No, you've gone beyond that. You understood what I was trying to build here, and you helped articulate it better than I could have myself." She paused. "I don't say this often, but thank you." Ryan felt heat creep up his neck. "I should be thanking you for taking a chance on someone with a 3-year gap in their resume. That gap made you better, not worse. You understand what matters now." They stood there in comfortable silence, drinking coffee while the winter darkness pressed against the windows. Ryan checked his watch and swore softly. "Sophie's concert. I need to go." "Of course." Evelyn straightened quickly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to keep you." "You didn't. I stayed because I wanted to." The words came out more honest than Ryan intended. "But I promised her I'd be there early." "Then go. The campaign can wait until Monday." Ryan gathered his things, but paused at the door. "What are you doing for Christmas?" The question surprised them both. Evelyn's carefully neutral expression flickered. "Working, probably. The Japanese markets don't close for American holidays." "That's not really celebrating." "I don't really celebrate." The admission hung in the air, sad and matter-of-fact. Ryan thought about his own Christmas plans, modest but warm, Sophie's excitement about Santa, his mother-in-law's traditional dinner. Then he thought about Evelyn alone in her penthouse, working through a holiday she didn't celebrate. "You should take a day off," he said. "Even workaholics need rest." Evelyn smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'll consider it. Now go. Don't miss Sophie's concert because of me." Ryan left, but the image of Evelyn's empty Christmas stayed with him through Sophie's beautiful performance of Silent Night, through the hot chocolate and cookies after, through the drive home in softly falling snow. Sophie chattered about the concert, about her friends, about what she hoped Santa would bring. Ryan listened and responded, but part of his mind was elsewhere, thinking about a woman who'd built an empire but had no one to celebrate it with. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ryan sat at the kitchen table with his phone in his hand. It was presumptuous to text his boss. Inappropriate, probably. Crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. But he thought about Evelyn's expression when she'd said, "I don't really celebrate." And before he could overthink it, he typed, "Sophie wanted me to tell you that everyone should have someone to celebrate with. She says you should come to Christmas dinner if you want. No pressure, just an invitation." He hit send before he could delete it. 3 minutes passed. 5. Ryan started to regret the impulse. Then his phone buzzed. "That's very kind of Sophie. Please thank her for me. But I couldn't intrude on your family time." Ryan typed back, "You wouldn't be intruding. Sophie's already planning to set an extra place at the table just in case. She's persistent when she decides something." A longer pause this time. Ryan imagined Evelyn in her penthouse, reading his message, debating how to respond. Finally, "I'll think about it. Merry Christmas, Ryan." "Merry Christmas, Evelyn." Ryan set down his phone, not sure whether he hoped she'd come or dreaded the complexity it would bring. But the invitation was out there now, genuine and impossible to take back. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow and Sophie's barely contained excitement. Ryan's mother-in-law, Margaret, arrived early to help with cooking, her arms full of grocery bags and her face bright with the first real happiness Ryan had seen from her since Emma's death. "It's good to see you looking better," she said, hugging him tight. "You've seemed lighter these past few months." "The job helped. Stability." "It's more than that." Margaret studied him with the knowing gaze of someone who'd raised 3 children and buried a daughter. "You seem alive again." Ryan thought about late nights in the office, about conversations that stretched past midnight, about gray eyes and unexpected laughter. "I'm trying to be." Sophie burst into the kitchen, wearing a Santa hat and carrying a carefully drawn place card. For Ms. Cross, I made it special. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Ms. Cross? Daddy's boss. I invited her to dinner because Daddy said she's alone for Christmas and that's sad. Actually, Sophie invited her, Ryan corrected. I just passed along the message. Margaret's expression shifted to something Ryan couldn't quite read. And is she coming? I don't know, probably not. But even as he said it, Ryan found himself hoping otherwise. Christmas Day dawned clear and cold. Sophie woke at dawn as children did on Christmas, and Ryan let her open presents while Margaret made coffee. The living room filled with torn wrapping paper and excited squeals, and for a while, everything was perfect and uncomplicated. They were starting dinner preparations when the doorbell rang. Ryan's heart jumped. He caught Margaret's knowing look as he went to answer it. Evelyn Cross stood on his porch, holding a bottle of wine that probably cost more than his monthly car payment. She wore jeans, actual jeans, and a soft gray sweater that made her look younger, less severe. Her hair was down, falling in dark waves past her shoulders. Ryan had never seen her look less like a CEO and more like a person who was nervous about showing up to a stranger's house for Christmas. I probably should have called first, Evelyn said. This might be incredibly presumptuous. Sophie, Ryan called over his shoulder. We need to set that extra place after all. His daughter appeared instantly, eyes wide. Ms. Cross, you came. I did. I hope that's all right. Sophie grabbed Evelyn's hand with the unselfconscious confidence of childhood. I made you a place card and everything. Come see. Ryan watched as his 7-year-old daughter led his boss into their small house, chattering about presents and Christmas cookies and the snow. Evelyn followed, looking simultaneously overwhelmed and touched. Margaret appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. You must be Ms. Cross. Evelyn, please. She offered the wine. Thank you for having me. Any friend of Ryan's is welcome here. Margaret's tone was warm but assessing, though I have to say I didn't expect him to invite his boss to Christmas dinner. I didn't exactly invite her, Ryan interjected. Sophie did. Because everyone should have someone to celebrate with, Sophie announced, pulling Evelyn toward the dining room to show her the place card, decorated with glitter and stickers and Sophie's careful printing of Miss Cross. Evelyn stared at it for a long moment, and when she looked up, her eyes were suspiciously bright. This is beautiful, Sophie. Thank you. Dinner was chaotic in the way that family meals always were. Sophie dominated the conversation, telling Evelyn about school and her friends and her elaborate plans for what she wanted to be when she grew up. Margaret contributed stories about Emma as a child, carefully chosen ones that made them all laugh rather than cry. Ryan watched it all, marveling at how natural Evelyn seemed in his modest dining room, how she listened to Sophie with genuine interest, how she fit into their small family gathering like a piece they hadn't known was missing. After dinner, while Margaret and Ryan cleaned up, Sophie insisted on showing Evelyn her room, her books, her collection of rocks from the park. Ryan could hear his daughter's voice carrying from upstairs, an endless stream of 7-year-old observations and questions. She's good with Sophie, Margaret said quietly, scrubbing a pot. She is. She's also looking at you the way you look at her when you think no one's watching. Ryan nearly dropped the dish he was drying. Margaret, Emma would want you to be happy again, Ryan. You know that. It's not, we're just colleagues. She's my boss. Margaret gave him a look that said she wasn't buying it. Emma was my daughter, and losing her nearly killed me. But you being alone for the rest of your life won't bring her back. It'll just mean 2 people died instead of 1. The words hit harder than Ryan expected. He set down the dish, gripping the counter. I don't know if I'm ready. No one's ever ready. But that woman upstairs is listening to Sophie talk about rocks with more patience than anyone I've seen outside of family. And the way you smiled when she walked through that door tells me you've already made a choice. You're just too scared to admit it. Before Ryan could respond, Evelyn appeared in the kitchen doorway. Sophie fell asleep. I think the excitement of the day caught up with her. I'll tuck her in, Margaret said, shooting Ryan a meaningful look as she left. Suddenly alone with Evelyn in his kitchen, Ryan felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Thank you for coming, he said. It meant a lot to Sophie. It meant a lot to me too. Evelyn leaned against the counter, her posture relaxed in a way he'd never seen at the office. I can't remember the last time I had a real Christmas. This was, she paused, searching for words. This was exactly what I didn't know I needed. Sophie has that effect on people. It's not just Sophie. Evelyn met his eyes. You have a beautiful life, Ryan. A real one. I envy that. Ryan thought about the bills he was still catching up on, the small house that needed repairs, the constant juggling of work and parenthood. It's not perfect. Nothing real ever is. Evelyn moved closer, and Ryan was acutely aware of the intimacy of the moment. His kitchen, the soft light, the two of them alone. But it's honest. It's built on what actually matters. What matters to you? The question came out quieter than he intended. Evelyn was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I used to think building the company was enough, proving I could succeed, that I was worth something. But lately, she stopped, shaking her head. Lately what? Lately I've been wondering what the point is. All this success, all this achievement, and I go home to an empty apartment every night. I work 70-hour weeks, and there's no one to notice when I don't come home. I've built an empire, but I forgot to build a life. Ryan's chest tightened. He recognized that loneliness, the way success could hollow you out if there was no one to share it with. You're here now, he said, sharing this one. Evelyn looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. Vulnerability, maybe. Or hope. Am I? Or am I just a guest passing through? The question hung between them, weighted with meaning. Ryan knew he should say something safe, professional, something that maintained the boundary between boss and employee. Instead, he said, that depends on whether you want to be. Evelyn's breath caught. For a moment, Ryan thought she might close the distance between them, might cross the line they'd been dancing around for months. But Margaret's footsteps sounded on the stairs, and the moment shattered. She's out like a light, Margaret announced, walking into the kitchen. That child could sleep through anything. Evelyn stepped back, her professional mask sliding into place so smoothly that Ryan almost doubted what he'd seen beneath it. I should go. Thank you again for dinner. You're welcome any time, Margaret said, and meant it. Ryan walked Evelyn to the door, helped her with her coat. In the doorway, she paused. Ryan, yeah? This was the best Christmas I've had in years. Thank you for letting me be part of it. Before he could respond, she was gone, walking to her car through the softly falling snow. Ryan closed the door and leaned against it, his heart pounding. You're in trouble, Margaret said from behind him. I know. She's in trouble too. Ryan turned to look at his mother-in-law. What am I supposed to do about that? Margaret smiled sadly. Whatever feels right. Whatever honors what you had with Emma while still allowing yourself to live. That night, after Margaret had gone home and the house was quiet, Ryan stood in his bedroom staring at Emma's photograph. Her smile looked back at him, frozen in a moment of perfect happiness. I don't know what I'm doing, he whispered. I don't know if this is okay. The photograph didn't answer, but Ryan remembered Emma's voice, the conversation they'd had in her final weeks when she'd made him promise not to spend his life alone. You deserve to be happy, Ryan. Sophie deserves to see her father happy. Don't let grief turn you into a ghost. He thought about Evelyn's expression when Sophie had shown her the place card. The way she'd listened so intently to a 7-year-old's rambling stories. The vulnerability in her voice when she'd admitted her loneliness. Ryan was falling for her. Had been falling for weeks, maybe months. And the terrifying part was that he was pretty sure she was falling too. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange, suspended state. The office was quiet, most employees taking vacation time. Ryan brought Sophie to work a few days when Margaret wasn't available, setting her up with coloring books in his office while he finished year-end projects. On one of those days, Evelyn stopped by. Is this the famous Sophie? Ryan's daughter looked up from her drawing and smiled. Hi, Ms. Cross. Want to see my picture? I'd love to. Evelyn sat down on the floor, actually sat on the floor of Ryan's office in her expensive suit, and examined Sophie's drawing with serious attention. Is this a dragon? A purple dragon. They're the nicest kind. I didn't know that. Most people don't, but it's true. Ryan watched them, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. Evelyn asked questions, made suggestions, praised Sophie's color choices. She was natural with his daughter in a way that surprised him. "My daddy works really hard," Sophie announced, "but he's not too busy for me." "That's because you're the most important thing in his life," Evelyn said simply. "Are you important too?" The question made both adults freeze. Ryan opened his mouth to deflect, but Sophie kept going with the brutal honesty of children. "Because Daddy talks about you a lot, and he smiles when he does." Evelyn's eyes met Ryan's, and he saw his own panic mirrored there. "Your daddy is very good at his job," Evelyn said carefully. "We work together a lot. But do you make him happy?" "Sophie," Ryan interjected, "that's not an appropriate question." "Why not? Grandma Margaret says it's important that you're happy." "Grandma Margaret talks too much," Ryan muttered, but Evelyn was smiling, and it transformed her face. "I hope I make your daddy's work enjoyable, at least." "That's good," Sophie returned to her coloring. "Because he likes you, I can tell." Ryan wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. "Sophie, why don't you go get a snack from the break room? I put money in my wallet." His daughter left cheerfully, completely unaware of the bomb she'd just dropped. "I'm so sorry," Ryan said immediately. "She doesn't have a filter." "She's 7. She's not supposed to." Evelyn stood, brushing off her skirt. "And she's observant. Too observant. Is she wrong?" The question stopped Ryan cold. Evelyn was watching him with those gray eyes, and there was something in her expression that made his pulse race. "About what?" he asked, even though he knew. "About you liking me." Ryan could lie, should lie, maintain the professional boundary, keep things simple. But he'd been lying to himself for weeks, and he was tired of it. "No," he said quietly. "She's not wrong." Evelyn's breath caught. "Ryan, I know it's complicated. I know all the reasons this is a terrible idea, but I can't stop thinking about you, about our conversations, about the way you laughed at Marcus's terrible joke last week, about how you looked at Sophie's place card like it was the most precious thing you'd ever seen. You shouldn't be thinking about those things. I'm your boss. I know, trust me, I've reminded myself of that about 1,000 times." Evelyn walked to the window, her back to him. "This can't happen, Ryan. The power dynamic alone, I know. And I'm not—" She stopped, her shoulders tense. "I'm not what you think I am." "What do you mean?" She turned, and the vulnerability in her face nearly undid him. "I mean, I'm damaged goods. I mean, there are things about me, about my past, about my body, that would make any sensible man run in the opposite direction. Evelyn, the cancer wasn't just a diagnosis, it was invasive. I had a full hysterectomy at 32. I can't have children, Ryan. I can't give you more children or give Sophie siblings or be the kind of woman who—" "Stop." Ryan crossed the room before he could think better of it. "Just stop." Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You don't understand. Then help me understand. But don't make assumptions about what I want or what I can handle. I have scars. Physical scars that— We all have scars, Evelyn. Some are just more visible than others. You don't know what you're saying. Don't I?" Ryan's voice was gentle but firm. "I lost my wife. I spent 3 years barely surviving, trying to be enough for Sophie while feeling like I was failing at everything. I know what it's like to carry damage, to feel broken. This is different." "How?" Evelyn pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "Because men say they understand until they see the reality, until they realize that dating me comes with medical appointments and health scares and the constant reminder that I'm not whole." "You are whole," Ryan said. "You're just different than you were. That doesn't make you less." "It does to most people." "Then they're idiots." Ryan ran a hand through his hair, frustrated and aching for her. "Look, I'm not saying this isn't complicated. I'm not saying I have all the answers. But I know that what I feel for you is real, and I know that Sophie's innocent question wasn't wrong. I do like you, more than like you. And whatever you think disqualifies you from being cared about, it doesn't." Evelyn stared at him, something breaking open in her expression. "I'm scared, Ryan." "Of what?" "Of letting someone in and having them leave when they see who I really am underneath all this." She gestured at herself, at the expensive clothes and carefully maintained appearance. of being vulnerable and having it used against me. I would never cheat. You can't promise that. No one can. She was right, and they both knew it. Ryan couldn't guarantee he'd never hurt her, never disappoint her. He could only offer the truth. You're right, he said. I can't promise I'll be perfect. But I can promise I see you, Evelyn. Not just the CEO, not just the success story. I see the woman who works until midnight because she's afraid of going home to an empty apartment, who remembered every detail Sophie told her about rocks because she actually cared, who built a company on principles because she believes in protecting people. That's who I like. That's who I... He stopped, the word catching in his throat. Who you what? Who I could love, Ryan admitted, if you let me. The confession hung between them, impossible to take back. Evelyn's eyes were wide, shocked and scared, and something else Ryan couldn't name. Sophie's voice carried from down the hall, singing something about cookies. She's coming back, Evelyn said, her voice shaking. I know. We can't do this here. Not now. I know that too. Evelyn moved toward the door but paused. Ryan, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. She nodded, something complex and painful in her expression, and left just as Sophie rounded the corner with a cookie in each hand. Where'd Ms. Cross go? Back to work, sweetheart. Oh. Sophie handed him a cookie. She seemed sad. Maybe a little. You should make her happy again, Daddy. That's what people who care about each other do. Ryan pulled his daughter into a hug, marveling at her wisdom and terrified by its implications. That evening, after he'd dropped Sophie at Margaret's for a sleepover, Ryan's phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Can you come to my office? I need to show you something. His heart hammering, Ryan drove back into the city. The building was nearly empty, the security guard waving him through with barely a glance. The elevator ride up felt endless. Evelyn's office door was open. She stood at the window, silhouetted against the city lights. You came, she said without turning. You asked me to. I wasn't sure you would. After this afternoon. Evelyn, whatever you need to say, I'm listening. She finally turned to face him, and Ryan saw the fear and determination warring in her expression. You said you could love me, she said, but you don't know what that means, what it would really mean. Then show me. For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then, with shaking hands, she began unbuttoning her blouse. Evelyn, you need to see, she said. You need to know what you're saying before you say it. She opened her blouse, revealing the camisole beneath. Then, slowly, she lifted it. The scars ran across her abdomen, surgical lines intersecting in patterns that spoke of invasive procedures and difficult recoveries. Some were thin and white with age. Others were newer, angrier. This is what's underneath, she whispered. This is what I am. Ryan stepped closer, his eyes on her face, not the scars. Can I? She nodded, trembling. Gently, carefully, Ryan reached out and traced one of the scars with his fingertips. Evelyn flinched but didn't pull away. These are proof you survived, he said quietly. Proof you fought and won. They're ugly. They're part of your story. He met her eyes. And your story is beautiful, Evelyn. All of it. Even the painful parts. A tear slid down her cheek. No one ever stays, Ryan. They see this and I'm not going anywhere. You can't know that. Then let me prove it. Ryan cupped her face gently. Let me show you what it's like to be seen and chosen anyway. Evelyn leaned into his touch, and Ryan felt the exact moment she stopped fighting. The exact moment she let herself believe just a little that maybe this could be real. I'm terrified, she whispered. Me too. What if we ruin everything? What if we don't? Evelyn closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there was a fragile hope there that made Ryan's chest ache. Okay, she said. Okay. Ryan pulled her close, careful of her scars, and felt her arms wrap around him. They stood there in her office, two broken people choosing to be brave, and for the first time in years, neither of them felt quite so alone. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, while the city sparkled below them. Ryan could feel Evelyn's heartbeat against his chest, rapid and uncertain, matching his own. When they finally pulled apart, Evelyn's eyes were red, but her expression was clearer than he'd ever seen it. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do what?" "This, us, any of it." She gestured helplessly. "I haven't dated anyone in 5 years. And even before that, I was terrible at it. I chose work over relationships every single time. I prioritized the company over everything else because it was safer than being vulnerable." Ryan reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "We'll figure it out together. There's no rule book for this." "There should be." A hint of her usual control crept back into her voice. "We work together. The ethics alone. We'll be careful. We'll be professional at work. And we'll talk to HR if this becomes something real." "If?" Evelyn's eyebrow arched. "When?" Ryan corrected, unable to suppress his smile. "When this becomes something real." She squeezed his hand, and for the first time since he'd known her, Evelyn Cross looked genuinely uncertain. Not about business or strategy or corporate decisions, but about something infinitely more personal and terrifying. "I need to tell you everything," she said. "About the cancer, about the aftermath. You deserve to know what you're signing up for." "Okay." They sat on the couch in her office, and Evelyn talked. She told him about the diagnosis at 32, the shock of it, the way her world had imploded overnight. About the surgery that had saved her life but taken away her ability to have children. About the reconstruction, the complications, the months of recovery spent alone because she'd pushed everyone away. "I was angry," she said, staring at their joined hands. "Angry at my body for betraying me, angry at the universe for the cosmic joke of finally having the success I'd worked for and losing the chance at the family I'd always assumed I'd have someday. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing I could control." Did it help? For a while. Building the company, proving I could still create something meaningful. It gave me purpose, but it also became a shield. I used my success to keep people at a distance. If I was too busy, too driven, too intimidating, no one would get close enough to see the damage. Ryan thought about his own shields, the way he'd hidden behind single fatherhood and financial stress to avoid dealing with his grief. "I did the same thing. Different method, same result." "How did you survive it?" Evelyn asked. "Losing Emma?" Ryan was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Honestly, some days I didn't think I would. The first year was just survival mode, taking care of Sophie, keeping us afloat, trying not to fall apart in front of her. I'd cry in the shower or late at night when she was asleep. I'd talk to Emma's picture and feel insane for doing it. That's not insane. Maybe not. But it felt like I was stuck, like I couldn't move forward without betraying her memory, but I couldn't keep living in the past either. It was Sophie who finally pulled me through. She needed me to be present, not just physically there, but actually engaged with life. And slowly, painfully, I learned how to do that again." Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. "Does it ever stop hurting?" "The grief? No. But it changes, becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, a gesture so natural it surprised them both. "Are you still in treatment?" "Surveillance. I have checkups every 6 months. Blood work, imaging, the whole routine. I've been clear for 8 years, but ovarian cancer can recur. So I live in this state of perpetual monitoring, waiting for the other shoe to drop." "That must be exhausting." "It is. And it's isolating. Most people don't want to deal with that uncertainty. They want easy, uncomplicated relationships, not someone who comes with a medical history and regular appointments to check if the cancers come back." Ryan pulled back to look at her. "Evelyn, I'm a widowed single father with a mountain of debt I'm still climbing out of and a 7-year-old who's my entire world. I'm not exactly uncomplicated either." A small smile tugged at her lips. "We're quite a pair." "We really are." They talked until past midnight, sharing stories and fears and hopes they'd kept locked away. Evelyn told him about growing up poor, about her mother who'd worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet, about using the library computers to teach herself to code because they couldn't afford a computer at home, about the scholarship that changed everything and the determination to never be poor again. Ryan told her about meeting Emma in college, about their whirlwind romance and quick marriage. about the journalism career that had been everything he dreamed of until it wasn't enough to support a family, about the crushing guilt of not being able to save Emma, even though rationally he knew cancer didn't work that way. I kept thinking if I'd caught it sooner, if we'd had better insurance, if I'd made more money for better treatments. His voice cracked. But the truth is, sometimes people die and there's nothing you can do about it. That's the hardest part, the helplessness. I felt that too, Evelyn said quietly. When I was sick, I was terrified of losing control, of my body making decisions without my consent. So I controlled everything I could, my treatment plan, my work schedule. Who knew about the diagnosis? I became so rigid because it was the only way I could cope. Are you still that rigid? She considered the question. Less than I was. But yes, probably. I schedule everything, plan for every contingency, maintain control over every aspect of my life. It's exhausting, but it's how I function. That's going to drive me crazy, you know. I'm much more go with the flow. I know, I've noticed. Evelyn's smile was genuine now. You showed up to your interview in a borrowed shirt and still managed to impress everyone. That kind of adaptability is completely foreign to me. And your planning and organization would probably give my chaotic lifestyle a heart attack, but maybe we balance each other out. Maybe. Evelyn glanced at the clock and sighed. It's almost 1 a.m. I should go. Let you get some sleep. I don't want you to go. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Ryan cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. I don't want to go either, but we should take this slow. Figure out what this is before we complicate things further. When did you become the voice of reason? About 30 seconds ago. I'm already regretting it. Evelyn laughed, the sound light and free in a way he'd never heard from her. Then she kissed him, soft and tentative, and Ryan felt his resolve crumble. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Evelyn rested her forehead against his. Slow, she murmured. We'll take it slow. Right, slow. Neither of them moved. You should really go, Evelyn said. I really should. Ryan stood, forcing himself to step back. I'll see you Monday? Monday. Evelyn walked him to the door. Ryan? Yeah? Thank you for seeing me. All of me. He kissed her again, quick and sweet. Thank you for letting me. The drive home passed in a blur. Ryan's mind raced with everything that had happened, everything that had changed. He was falling for Evelyn Cross. No, he'd already fallen. And terrifyingly, wonderfully, she was falling too. The next few weeks passed in a strange double existence. At work, they were consummate professionals, collaborating on projects, attending meetings, maintaining the appropriate boss-employee dynamic. But after hours, when the office emptied out, they found excuses to stay late, to talk, to steal moments in her office or his, learning each other in the quiet spaces between their public and private lives. Ryan told Sophie he was working on a big project, which wasn't entirely a lie. He was navigating the most complex relationship of his life, trying to balance his growing feelings for Evelyn with his responsibilities to his daughter and his career. You're happy, Sophie observed one morning over breakfast. You smile more now. Do I? Yeah, like you used to before Mommy got sick. She took a bite of cereal, thoughtful. I like it when you're happy. Ryan's chest tightened. What would you think if Daddy started dating someone? Sophie's eyes went wide. Like Ms. Cross? I'm asking hypothetically. What's hypothetically? It means pretend. Oh. Sophie considered this seriously. I think Mommy would want you to be happy. She told me that before. She said Daddy deserves to smile again. Ryan's vision blurred. Emma had talked to Sophie about this, prepared her for the possibility that he might move on. The generosity of it, the love, undid him. She was pretty smart, your mom. The smartest. Sophie reached across the table to pat his hand. So if you like Ms. Cross, it's okay. I like her too. It's not that simple, sweetheart. Why not? Ryan struggled to explain the complications, the workplace dynamics, the power imbalance, the fact that he was still processing his own grief while trying to open his heart to someone new. Grown-up stuff is weird, Sophie concluded. It really is. But his daughter's blessing, innocent as it was, mattered more than Ryan had expected. He wasn't just making a decision for himself. Any relationship he entered would affect Sophie too, and knowing she was open to the possibility made everything feel slightly less impossible. That evening, after Sophie was in bed, Ryan texted Evelyn, "Sophie knows I care about you. She approves." The response came quickly. "She does?" "She says Emma told her I deserved a smile again. Kids are pretty wise." A longer pause this time, then, "They are. I'm glad she's okay with this. Whatever this is. Want to have dinner this weekend?" Actual dinner, not working late and ordering takeout to the office. "Like a date?" "Exactly like a date." "I don't know how to date, Ryan. I told you that." "Me neither. We'll figure it out together. Say yes." Another pause, and Ryan could imagine her sitting in her penthouse, debating, overthinking. Finally, "Yes. Saturday?" "Saturday. I'll pick you up at 7. "You don't know where I live? Then tell me." She sent her address, and Ryan smiled at his phone like a teenager. They were doing this. Actually doing this. Saturday arrived with a mix of excitement and terror. Ryan dropped Sophie at Margaret's, enduring his mother-in-law's knowing looks and pointed questions about his evening plans. "Her name is Evelyn," he admitted. "And yes, it's a date. Our first one." Margaret's expression softened. "Good. It's about time." "Is it? It feels too soon and too late at the same time." "That's how it always feels. But Ryan, you've been alone for 3 years. Emma wouldn't want that. She'd want you to live." "I know. Sophie said the same thing." "Then listen to the wisdom of the women in your life." Margaret squeezed his shoulder. "Go. Have a good time. Don't overthink it." Easier said than done. Ryan changed his shirt 3 times before settling on something between casual and trying too hard. He bought flowers, then worried they were too traditional, then decided he didn't care. Evelyn's building was exactly what he'd expected. Sleek, modern, expensive. The doorman eyed him with polite suspicion until Evelyn came down, stunning in a simple black dress that somehow made her look both elegant and approachable. "You brought flowers," she said, surprised. "Too much?" "No, they're perfect." She took them, and Ryan saw her hands shake slightly. She was as nervous as he was. "Come up for a minute. I should put these in water." Her penthouse was beautiful in the way that magazine spreads were beautiful. All clean lines and expensive furniture and carefully curated art. But it was also impersonal, almost sterile. There were no photographs, no personal touches, nothing that said a living, breathing person actually existed here. "It's not very homey," Evelyn admitted, following his gaze. "I know. I hired a designer and let her do whatever she wanted. I'm barely here anyway." "Where are you then?" "The office, mostly. I have everything I need there." "Except a life." Evelyn's expression tightened, but not with anger, with recognition. "Except that, yes." Ryan walked to the window, taking in the stunning view. "This is incredible." "It's expensive. There's a difference." He turned to find her watching him with uncertainty, as if waiting for judgment. Instead, he crossed the room and took her hand. "Thank you for showing me this, for letting me in. It's just an apartment. It's part of your life. That makes it important." Evelyn squeezed his hand, then stepped back to put the flowers in a vase. "I'm really nervous," she admitted. "I feel like a teenager on her first date, except I'm 42 and supposedly have my life together. I'm 36 and I have no idea what I'm doing, so we're even." "Where are we going?" "It's a surprise." "I don't like surprises." Ryan grinned. "I know, but trust me on this one." The restaurant was a small Italian place in Brooklyn, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles and food that tasted like someone's grandmother had been cooking all day. It was the opposite of the high-end establishments Evelyn probably frequented for business dinners. "This is perfect," she said, and meant it. They talked through dinner, the conversation flowing easily now that they weren't in the office or bound by professional constraints. Evelyn told him about her early days building the company, the investors who'd dismissed her, the satisfaction of proving them wrong. Ryan shared stories about journalism, about the stories that had mattered and the ones that had haunted him. "Why did you stop?" Evelyn asked. "Journalism, I mean. You were good at it." Emma got sick, and suddenly uncovering corporate corruption didn't seem as important as being home. Then after she died, I couldn't go back to it. The deadlines, the travel, the unpredictability. I needed stability for Sophie, and honestly, I'd lost the fire for it. When you watch someone you love die, a lot of things that seemed urgent before just stop mattering. But you still love storytelling. I do. That's what drew me to the position at Cross Tech. Different medium, same core skill. Finding the narrative that makes people care. You're good at it. The privacy campaign. It's the best work our department has produced in years. That's because you gave me something real to work with. Your story, your passion for protecting people. That authenticity is what makes it powerful. Evelyn looked at him across the candlelit table, her eyes soft. You see things differently than most people. You look for the human element in everything. Is that a compliment? Yes, though it's probably going to make you frustrated with my analytical approach to everything. I doubt that. Your analytical approach built a billion-dollar company. My human element got me into debt trying to save my wife with treatments insurance wouldn't cover. The words came out more bitter than Ryan intended. Evelyn reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. That wasn't your fault. Rationally, I know that. Emotionally, I still feel like I failed her. You didn't. You loved her. You fought for her. Sometimes that's all we can do. They sat in silence for a moment, hands linked across the table. Two people who understood loss in ways they'd never wanted to. This is our first date, Evelyn said. We're supposed to be charming and flirtatious, not discussing dead wives and cancer. We're not very good at this, are we? Terrible. But she was smiling, though I prefer this to pretending we're people we're not. Me too. After dinner, they walked along the Brooklyn waterfront, the Manhattan skyline glittering across the water. It was cold, and Evelyn shivered until Ryan draped his jacket over her shoulders. Very chivalrous, she teased. I have my moments. They found a bench overlooking the water and sat close, watching the city lights reflect on the dark surface. I had a health scare last month, Evelyn said quietly. Right before Christmas. Some abnormal test results that had my oncologist concerned. Ryan's heart clenched. What happened? They ran more tests, did additional imaging, turned out to be nothing, just a benign cyst that had them worried. But for about a week I was convinced the cancer was back, that everything I'd survived was just a temporary reprieve. Why didn't you tell me? Because we weren't this yet. We were still dancing around each other, pretending what we felt was just professional respect. She turned to look at him, and because I was terrified. If it had been cancer again, I would have had to go through it alone. Again. And I couldn't bear the thought of that. Ryan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. You're not alone anymore. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. Whatever happens, whatever comes, you don't have to face it alone. I'm here. Evelyn buried her face in his chest, and Ryan felt her shoulders shake. He held her while she cried, quiet tears she'd probably been holding back for weeks, maybe years. When she finally pulled back, her makeup was smudged, but her expression was lighter. I'm a mess, she said. You're beautiful. You're biased. Absolutely. Ryan kissed her forehead. But I'm not wrong. They sat there for a long time, wrapped in each other's warmth, watching the city and talking about everything and nothing. About Sophie's latest school project, about Evelyn's plans for the company's expansion, about their favorite books and movies, and the small details that made up a life. It was past midnight when Ryan finally drove her home. At her door, Evelyn hesitated. Do you want to come up? I want to, but I'm going to say no. Why? Because you were right earlier. We should take this slow. Build something real instead of rushing into something we're not ready for. Evelyn looked disappointed but understanding. When did you become so sensible? I have no idea. It's very out of character. Ryan kissed her, slow and deep, taking his time. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. But I want to do this right, Evelyn. You deserve that. What I deserve is you coming upstairs and kissing me like that for the next several hours. Soon, I promise. She smiled against his lips. I'm going to hold you to that. I'm counting on it. Ryan waited until she was safely inside before driving home, his heart full and terrified in equal measure. He was in love with Evelyn Cross, completely, irrevocably in love. And for the first time since Emma died, that felt like a gift instead of a betrayal. The next few months passed in a blur of stolen moments and careful navigation. At work, they maintained strict professionalism, consulting with HR to ensure everything was above board. Outside of work, they built something neither had expected, a relationship based on honesty, vulnerability, and the understanding that they were both scarred but still capable of love. Evelyn met Sophie officially, and Ryan watched his daughter and the woman he loved bond over art projects and science experiments. Evelyn approached parenthood the same way she approached everything, with intense focus and a willingness to learn. She asked Sophie questions, listened to the answers, and never pretended to be something she wasn't. "She's not trying to replace Mommy," Sophie told Ryan one night. "She's just being herself. I like that." "Me too, sweetheart." In April, Evelyn had another checkup. Ryan took the afternoon off to go with her, sitting in the waiting room while she underwent scans and blood work. When she emerged, pale but smiling, he knew everything was okay. "Clear," she said. "Still clear." Ryan pulled her into his arms, feeling the tension drain from both of them. "Of course you are. You're too stubborn for cancer to come back." "Is that how medicine works?" "It should be." That night, Evelyn stayed over at Ryan's house for the first time. Sophie was at Margaret's, and they had the place to themselves. Ryan cooked dinner while Evelyn sat at the kitchen counter, looking slightly out of place in his modest home, but more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "This is nice," she said. "Domestic." "Is that good or bad?" "Good. Different from what I'm used to, but good." After dinner, they sat on the couch, Evelyn curled into his side. "I love you," she said quietly. "I don't think I've said that yet." Ryan's heart stopped, then started again, faster. "You haven't." "Well, I do. Love you. It terrifies me, but it's true." He tilted her face up, looking into those gray eyes he'd come to know so well. "I love you too. Have for months." "Since when?" "Honestly, probably since you handed me that borrowed shirt and told me to earn the job. You were kind when you didn't have to be, and I've been falling ever since." Evelyn kissed him, and this time when she suggested going upstairs, Ryan didn't say no. They made love slowly, carefully, Evelyn trusting him with her scars and her vulnerability, Ryan showing her that she was beautiful exactly as she was. Afterward, lying in his bed with Evelyn in his arms, Ryan felt something shift into place. This was his life now. Not just surviving, but living. Not just being a father, but being a partner too. "Move in with me," he said. Evelyn propped herself up on one elbow. "What?" "Move in, this house, or we find a new place together. Something that's ours." "Ryan, we've only been officially dating for 4 months." "I know, and I know it's fast, but I also know that I love you, that Sophie loves you, and that I don't want to spend another night without you here. So move in. Make this chaos your chaos." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, and Ryan worried he'd pushed too hard, too fast. Then she smiled. "Okay." "Okay? I'll move in, but we're definitely finding a new place. This house is too small for all 3 of us, plus my neurotic need for organization." Ryan laughed, pulling her close. "Deal." They talked until dawn about logistics and timing, about telling Sophie and managing work dynamics. But underneath the practical considerations was something deeper, a commitment to building a life together, scars and all. In June, Ryan asked Sophie's permission to marry Evelyn. His daughter's response was to throw her arms around him and squeal with excitement. "Can I be in the wedding?" "Of course." "And can we get a dog?" "That's a separate negotiation." Sophie ran off to draw pictures of the family she envisioned, leaving Ryan to contemplate the magnitude of what he was about to do. He'd loved Emma with his whole heart, and losing her had nearly destroyed him. Opening himself to that kind of vulnerability again was terrifying. But as he watched Evelyn emerge from his bedroom, wearing his shirt and looking rumpled and happy, Ryan knew he was ready. Not to replace what he'd had, but to build something new, something that honored his past while embracing his future. He proposed on a Saturday morning in their new apartment, the one they'd spent weeks finding together. Nothing fancy, just the two of them in the kitchen, coffee brewing and sunlight streaming through the windows. "Marry me," he said. Evelyn nearly dropped her mug. "What?" "I know we talked about this eventually, but I don't want to wait. I want you to be my wife. I want to build this life with you officially, completely. So marry me, Evelyn Cross." She set down her coffee with shaking hands. "You're serious?" "Completely. I'm difficult. I'm damaged. I have health issues that will never fully go away. I can't give you more children or a traditional family or any of the things you probably imagined when you thought about getting married again." Ryan cupped her face. "I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for you, all of you, exactly as you are. Marry me." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, tasting coffee and tears and joy, and felt his world expand to include this fierce, brilliant woman who'd chosen to let him in. They told Sophie together that afternoon, presenting it as a family decision. "We want to get married," Ryan said, "but only if you're okay with it." Sophie looked at Evelyn solemnly. "Will you be my mom?" "I'll be your stepmom," Evelyn said carefully. "Your mom was Emma, and that won't change, but I'll love you and take care of you and be part of your family, if you'll let me." "Okay," Sophie nodded. "That's good. Can we still get a dog?" "We'll discuss the dog," Ryan said, laughing. The wedding was small, intimate, held in the same park where Ryan and Emma had gotten married years before. Margaret cried through the entire ceremony, happy tears this time. Sophie stood between them, holding flowers and grinning so wide her face looked like it might split. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Sophie raised her hand. Ryan's heart stopped until his daughter said, "I object to not having already eaten cake." The gathered guests laughed, and Ryan felt the last of his guilt dissolve. This wasn't a betrayal. This was life continuing, expanding, making room for new love while still honoring what came before. Evelyn wore a simple white dress, and for the first time since he'd known her, she wore her scars visible beneath the lace, no longer hiding who she was. "I choose you," she said during their vows. "With all my fears and all my damage, I choose to trust you with my heart. I choose to believe that love is worth the risk." Ryan's voice shook as he responded. "I choose you too, and I promise that you will never face anything alone again. Whatever comes, joy or hardship, health or sickness, I'm not leaving. I'm right here choosing you every single day." They sealed it with a kiss, and Sophie cheered, and for the first time in years, Ryan felt complete. That night, after Sophie was asleep and the guests had left, Ryan and Evelyn stood on the balcony of their apartment, watching the city lights. "Mrs. Hale," Ryan said, testing the words. "I'm keeping cross professionally," Evelyn said, "but I like the sound of it personally. We really did this. We really did." She leaned into him. "Are you scared?" "Terrified. You?" "Absolutely. But I'm also happier than I've been in my entire life." Ryan kissed the top of her head. "Me too." They stood there in the quiet, two people who'd been broken and had found healing in each other. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Evelyn's health would always be a concern. Their blended family would face challenges. Life would continue to be complicated. But they were facing it together, and that made all the difference. The first year of marriage brought challenges Ryan and Evelyn hadn't fully anticipated. Blending their lives meant navigating two completely different approaches to everything from household management to parenting to how they spent their weekends. Evelyn's instinct was to schedule and optimize every moment. Ryan's was to let things unfold organically. "We can't just decide what to have for dinner 5 minutes before we eat," Evelyn said one evening, staring at the empty refrigerator with visible distress. "That's not how meal planning works." "But that's how normal people live," Ryan countered, already pulling up a delivery app on his phone. "They get home, figure out what they want, and make it happen. That's chaos. That's flexibility." Sophie watched them from the kitchen table, a knowing smile on her face. "You guys are arguing about food again." "We're not arguing," they said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. "We're discussing," Evelyn amended, with passion. "Grandma Margaret says that's what married people do." Ryan pulled Evelyn close despite her half-hearted protest. Grandma Margaret is very wise. These small frictions were nothing compared to what happened in October, when Evelyn collapsed during a board meeting. Ryan got the call from Patricia, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Ryan, Evelyn's at Mount Sinai. She collapsed. They're running tests now." The world tilted sideways. Ryan was moving before his conscious mind had processed the words, grabbing his keys, shouting to his assistant that he had an emergency. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of worst-case scenarios and desperate prayers to a universe he wasn't sure was listening. He found Patricia in the waiting room, her usual composure cracked around the edges. "What happened?" Ryan demanded. "We were mid-presentation, and she just went down. 1 minute she was talking, the next she was on the floor." The paramedic said her blood pressure dropped suddenly. Ryan's mind raced through every medical possibility, every nightmare scenario. The cancer. It had to be the cancer. Everything always came back to that. Where is she? They took her back for imaging. Ryan, she was conscious when they loaded her into the ambulance. She kept saying it was nothing, that she was fine. She always says she's fine. Ryan ran his hands through his hair, feeling helpless in a way he hadn't since Emma's diagnosis. Did they say anything else? Just that they needed to run tests. The next 3 hours were the longest of Ryan's life. He paced the waiting room, called Margaret to pick up Sophie from school, tried not to let his imagination spiral into catastrophe. Other Cross Technologies executives arrived, hovering in worried clusters, but Ryan barely noticed them. Finally, a doctor emerged. "Family of Evelyn Cross? I'm her husband." The words still felt new on his tongue, but right now they were armor and authority. "She's stable. We're still running some tests, but preliminary results suggest severe dehydration and exhaustion. Her blood work shows some concerning markers we want to investigate further, but right now it doesn't appear to be a recurrence of her cancer." The relief nearly knocked Ryan's legs out from under him. "Can I see her?" "She's being moved to a room now. Follow me." Evelyn looked small in the hospital bed, connected to IVs and monitors that beeped with reassuring regularity. Her eyes were closed, but they opened when Ryan entered. "Before you say anything," she started, her voice hoarse, "I know I should have been taking better care of myself." Ryan pulled a chair to her bedside, taking her hand carefully around the IV. "What happened?" "I don't know. I was presenting to the board, and suddenly the room started spinning. Next thing I knew, I was waking up in an ambulance." The doctor said dehydration and exhaustion. Evelyn looked away. "I've been working a lot. The European expansion is demanding, and I wanted to make sure everything was perfect before the launch." "How much sleep have you been getting?" "Enough." "Evelyn," she sighed, 4, maybe 5 hours a night, sometimes less." "For how long?" "A few weeks, maybe 2 months." Ryan felt anger and fear warring in his chest. "You can't do this. You can't work yourself into the ground and expect your body to just keep functioning." "I know, there's so much to do, and I'm the only one who can make certain decisions, and you're going to kill yourself trying to do everything perfectly." Ryan's voice cracked. "I can't lose you, Evelyn. I can't go through that again." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." "But you did. You terrified me." "Patricia called and said you collapsed, and all I could think about was the cancer, was losing you the way I lost Emma, was having to explain to Sophie why another person she loves is gone. It's not cancer. Not this time. But what about next time? What happens when you push yourself so hard that your body gives out completely?" They sat in heavy silence, the monitors beeping steadily between them. "I don't know how to not work this hard," Evelyn admitted quietly. "It's who I've been for so long. Building the company, proving myself, staying in control. It's the only way I know how to be." "Then you need to learn a new way, because this isn't sustainable and I'm not going to stand by and watch you destroy yourself." The words came out harsher than Ryan intended, but he didn't take them back. Evelyn needed to hear this, needed to understand that her drive for perfection was a threat to her health and their family. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "Quit my job? Walk away from everything I've built?" "No. I want you to delegate, to trust your team, to remember that you're allowed to be human instead of superhuman." "That's not how you build a successful company." "Maybe not. but it's how you stay alive long enough to enjoy it. Evelyn closed her eyes, and Ryan saw the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She looked older than her 43 years, worn down by the relentless pressure she put on herself. "I'm scared," she whispered. "If I'm not exceptional, if I'm not indispensable, what value do I have?" Ryan's anger dissolved into heartbreak. "You have value because you exist, Evelyn, because you're you. Not because of what you produce, or how many hours you work, or how perfect your presentations are. You matter because you're a person I love, because Sophie looks up to you, because your life has meaning beyond your professional achievements." "I don't know if I believe that." "Then let me believe it for both of us until you can believe it for yourself." The doctor returned with test results and a stern lecture about self-care that echoed everything Ryan had said. They were keeping Evelyn overnight for observation and to ensure she was properly rehydrated. The concerning markers in her blood work needed follow-up, but they appeared to be stress-related rather than cancer indicators. "You need to make significant lifestyle changes," the doctor said bluntly. "Reduce your stress levels, get adequate sleep, maintain proper nutrition and hydration. Your body has been in survival mode for too long. Eventually, it will give out entirely if you don't make changes." After the doctor left, Evelyn stared at the ceiling. "I feel like a failure." "Why?" "Because I can't even take care of my own basic needs without ending up in the hospital. What kind of person does that?" "The kind who's been running on adrenaline and fear for most of her adult life," Ryan said gently. "The kind who learned early that rest was a luxury she couldn't afford. But Evelyn, you can afford it now. You have people who can help carry the load. You have a company full of talented executives who are capable of making decisions. You have a husband who loves you and a stepdaughter who needs you healthy more than she needs you successful. What if I delegate and everything falls apart? Then you deal with it, together, as a team." Ryan squeezed her hand. "You've spent your whole life believing you had to do everything alone, but you're not alone anymore. So let us help. Let me help." Evelyn was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "I don't know how." "Then we'll figure it out together, starting with you actually sleeping tonight instead of answering emails from your hospital bed. I need to send at least one message to the board explaining Patricia can handle that. She's been running interference all afternoon. But no buts. You're going to rest, hydrate, and let your body recover. Everything else can wait." For once, Evelyn didn't argue. She closed her eyes, and within minutes, her breathing had evened into sleep. Ryan sat beside her bed, watching her rest and feeling the weight of how close they'd come to disaster. When Margaret brought Sophie to visit the next morning, his daughter's eyes went wide at the sight of all the medical equipment. "Is Evelyn okay?" she whispered. "She will be," Ryan assured her. "She just needs to rest and take better care of herself." Sophie climbed carefully onto the bed, curling up next to Evelyn with the unconscious trust of a child who'd been shown consistent love. Evelyn's eyes opened, and she wrapped an arm around Sophie. "Hey, sweetheart." "You scared Daddy," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "He was really worried." "I'm sorry, I scared myself too. Grandma Margaret says you work too much, that you need to remember to take breaks and eat lunch and sleep." Evelyn glanced at Ryan over Sophie's head. "Grandma Margaret is right." "She usually is." Sophie snuggled closer. "Will you be home soon?" "This afternoon, if the doctor says it's okay." "Good. I made you a card. It has a dinosaur on it because dinosaurs are strong, and you need to be strong to get better." Ryan watched them together, this family they'd built from broken pieces, and felt his heart expand with love and fear in equal measure. Evelyn came home that afternoon with strict orders to rest and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the next week. Ryan had already cleared his schedule, arranged for Sophie's after-school care, and prepared to enforce bed rest whether Evelyn liked it or not. She lasted approximately 6 hours before trying to sneak into her home office. "Absolutely not," Ryan said, physically blocking the doorway. "I just need to check one thing." "No, you need to rest. The company will not collapse if you take a few days off." "You don't understand the pressure." "Actually, I do. I understand that you've built your entire identity around being indispensable, but right now you need to be dispensable enough to take care of yourself." They argued about it. Evelyn's frustration at being forced to rest colliding with Ryan's determination to keep her healthy. It was Sophie who finally broke the stalemate. "Stop fighting," she said from the hallway, her voice small and scared. "Please stop fighting." Both adults immediately shifted their attention to the little girl who looked near tears. "We're not fighting, sweetheart," Evelyn said gently. "We're just discussing—" "You're fighting about work, like you and Daddy always do." Sophie's lower lip trembled. "I don't want you to get sick again because of work. I don't want another mom to go away." The words hit like a physical blow. Ryan gathered his daughter into his arms, and Evelyn sank onto the couch, looking stricken. "Oh, Sophie," Evelyn breathed, "I'm not going anywhere." "Mommy said that too, and then she died." Ryan's chest tightened painfully. They'd underestimated how much Sophie was processing, how much their arguments about work and health were triggering her trauma around Emma's death. "Come here," Evelyn said, and Sophie climbed into her lap. "I know you're scared, and I know that my being in the hospital reminded you of when your mom was sick. But I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to stay healthy. That means working less and resting more, even when it's hard for me. Promise?" "I promise." Evelyn looked at Ryan over Sophie's head, and he saw the moment she truly understood what was at stake. "I promise I'll take better care of myself." "Because you're right, you both are. Nothing is worth risking our family." Over the next few weeks, Evelyn made gradual changes. She promoted 2 vice presidents to handle day-to-day operations, implemented mandatory vacation policies for herself and all executives, and actually started leaving the office at reasonable hours. It was hard for her, Ryan could see that. She chafed at the boundaries, struggled with the feeling of not being in complete control. But she stuck with it. For Sophie, for Ryan, for herself. The follow-up appointments showed her health markers improving. The stress-related inflammation was decreasing, her blood pressure stabilizing. The doctors were cautiously optimistic that with continued lifestyle changes, Evelyn could avoid future health crises. In January, a year after their wedding, Evelyn brought up a subject Ryan hadn't expected. "I've been thinking about adoption," she said one evening after Sophie had gone to bed. Ryan looked up from the article he'd been reading. "What?" "Adoption. Expanding our family." Evelyn sat beside him, nervous energy radiating from her body. "I know I can't have biological children, and I know Sophie is enough, but I keep thinking about all the kids who need families, who need someone to choose them." Ryan set down his tablet, giving her his full attention. "Tell me more." "When I was sick, I felt disposable, like my body had failed me and made me less worthy of love. I don't want other people to feel that way, especially children. There are so many kids in foster care who think no one wants them because they're damaged or difficult or not perfect. And I keep thinking we could show them that being broken doesn't make you unlovable." Ryan felt tears prick his eyes. "You want to adopt from foster care?" "If you're open to it, I know it's complicated and I know it would change our lives significantly, but I can't shake the feeling that our family isn't complete yet." "What does Sophie think?" "I haven't talked to her about it. I wanted to discuss it with you first." Ryan pulled Evelyn close, feeling the rightness of the idea settle into his bones. "I think it's a beautiful thought. Let's talk to Sophie and see how she feels." Sophie's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "A brother or sister? Really?" "Maybe," Ryan cautioned. "These things take time, and we'd need to go through a lot of steps first. But if everyone's on board, we can start the process." "I want a sister," Sophie declared. "Someone I can teach stuff to and play with and show how to do everything." The adoption process was exhausting and invasive in ways they hadn't anticipated. Background checks, home studies, interviews that felt more like interrogations. But they persevered, motivated by the belief that they had something to offer a child who needed a family. 6 months into the process, they were matched with a 7-year-old girl named Maya. She'd been in foster care for 3 years after her mother's parental rights were terminated due to addiction. The file described her as challenging, prone to outbursts, difficulty trusting adults behind in school. "She sounds perfect," Evelyn said, reading the caseworker's description. Ryan laughed. "Only you would think challenging sounds perfect. She needs someone who won't give up on her, Someone who understands that being difficult is often a defense mechanism for being hurt. We can be those people. The first meeting with Maya was awkward and tense. She sat in the social worker's office, arms crossed, expression guarded. When they introduced themselves, she barely acknowledged them. "I know you've heard a lot of promises from adults that didn't work out," Evelyn said, sitting across from her. "So I'm not going to make you promises, but I'm going to tell you the truth. My husband and I want to be your parents. We want to give you a home, a family, and the chance to be a kid instead of always having to protect yourself. But it's going to be hard work for all of us, and it's okay if you're not sure about it yet." Maya looked at her with suspicious eyes. "Why would you want me? I'm not a baby. I'm old." "You're exactly the right age," Evelyn said, "because we already have a daughter who's 8, and she's been hoping for a sister close to her age." "What if I don't like her?" "Then we'll deal with that, but we hope you'll at least give each other a chance." The first few months after Maya moved in were brutal. She tested every boundary, pushed every button, seemed determined to prove that they'd give up on her like everyone else had. She fought with Sophie, defied Ryan, and saved her worst behavior for Evelyn. "I hate you," Maya screamed during one particularly bad meltdown. "You're not my real mom, and you never will be." Evelyn stood firm, her voice calm despite the emotional assault. "You're right. I'm not your birth mother, but I am choosing to be your mom every single day, even when you're angry at me, especially when you're angry at me." "Why? I'm not special. I'm not worth it." "Yes, you are. You're worth everything, Maya, and I'm going to keep showing you that until you believe it." Slowly, painfully, Maya began to trust. Ryan watched it happen in small moments. Maya asking Evelyn for help with homework, laughing at one of Sophie's jokes, sitting with the family during movie night instead of hiding in her room. The breakthrough came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Maya had gotten in trouble at school for fighting, and Ryan had to leave work early to pick her up from the principal's office. On the drive home, she was silent, radiating defensive anger. "Want to talk about it?" Ryan asked. "No." "Okay, but when you're ready, I'm here to listen." At home, Maya went straight to her room. Ryan started dinner, worried about how to handle this without making it worse. An hour later, Evelyn came home and immediately sensed the tension. "What happened?" Ryan explained while chopping vegetables. "She won't talk about it. Just shut down completely." Evelyn headed upstairs. Ryan heard quiet voices, then nothing. 20 minutes later, both Maya and Evelyn emerged, Maya's eyes red from crying. "Maya has something she wants to tell you," Evelyn said gently. The little girl took a shaky breath. "I got in a fight because some kid said I didn't have a real family, that I was just a foster kid you were babysitting, and I got mad and pushed one of them." Ryan set down the knife and knelt to Maya's level. "What you did wasn't okay, but I understand why you were angry. Are you mad at me? I'm sad that someone said something hurtful to you, and I'm disappointed that you chose to push instead of using your words. But I'm not mad at you as a person. You made a mistake." "That doesn't change how I feel about you." Maya's face crumpled. "Even if I keep messing up?" "Even then, Maya, you're our daughter, not because you're perfect, but because we chose you and you chose us. That doesn't go away when things are hard." She threw herself into his arms, sobbing, and Ryan held her while she released months of fear and pain. Evelyn joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them, and Sophie appeared from her room to add herself to the pile. After that night, something shifted. Maya still had hard days, still struggled with trust and attachment, but she stopped testing whether they'd abandon her. She started to believe that this family was real, permanent, hers. By spring, the adoption was finalized. The courtroom was filled with friends and family, everyone crying happy tears as the judge made it official. Maya sat between Ryan and Evelyn, holding both their hands, a tentative smile on her face. "Congratulations," the judge said. "You're officially a family." That night, Ryan found Evelyn on their balcony, staring out at the city. "You okay?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I'm thinking about how different my life looks from what I imagined." "Is that good or bad?" "Good. Definitely good." She turned in his arms. 5 years ago, I was convinced I'd spend the rest of my life alone. That my scars and my past made me unlovable. And now I have you and Sophie and Maya. I have a family I never thought I'd get to have. You deserve this, Ryan said firmly. You deserve all of it. So do you. You could have given up after Emma died, could have stayed stuck in grief. Instead, you chose to keep living, keep hoping, keep being open to love. That's brave, Ryan. We're both brave. We just needed each other to remember how. In May, Evelyn was invited to speak at a national healthcare conference about her work in data privacy. But as she prepared her speech, she kept coming back to her own story, her own experience with medical privacy violations. I want to talk about it, she told Ryan, about the cancer, about what happened with my medical records, about how personal privacy became my mission. Are you sure? That's incredibly vulnerable. I know, but maybe it's time. Maybe sharing my story can help other people feel less alone in theirs. The speech was powerful and raw. Evelyn stood on stage in front of hundreds of people and talked about being 32 and terrified, about watching her private health information become public commodities, about building a company from that pain. I thought the cancer made me broken, she said, her voice strong and clear. I thought the scars meant I was less than whole, but I learned that being broken open is how the light gets in. That vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the foundation of connection, and that the things we think disqualify us from love are often the very things that make us capable of loving deeply. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, but what mattered most to Evelyn was seeing Ryan in the front row, tears streaming down his face, mouthing the words, "I'm so proud of you." After the conference, Evelyn and Ryan started a foundation focused on supporting cancer survivors in rebuilding their lives. They offered resources for medical privacy protection, counseling services, and programs specifically designed to help survivors understand they were still worthy of love and connection. This is what it was all for, Evelyn said at the foundation's launch. Every painful moment, every scar, every time I felt like giving up, it led here, to being able to help other people find hope in their darkest moments. Ryan watched his wife speak, watched her transform her pain into purpose, and felt overwhelmed with love. This was the woman who'd been afraid no one would want her, who'd hidden her scars and built walls to keep people out. Now she was standing in front of hundreds of people, vulnerable and open, using her story to heal others. That evening, as they walked home through the city they both loved, Evelyn stopped suddenly. "What?" Ryan asked. "I just realized something. I'm happy. Genuinely, completely happy." "When's the last time you were able to say that?" Ryan thought about it. "Right now, this moment, walking home with you, knowing our girls are safely at home with Margaret, knowing we've built something real and meaningful. Yeah, I'm happy too." They stood there on the sidewalk, people flowing around them, the city alive with energy and possibility. "Thank you," Evelyn said. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible. For staying when everyone else left. For showing me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing each other anyway." Ryan kissed her, slow and sweet, not caring about the strangers passing by. "Thank you for letting me in, for trusting me with your scars, for building this crazy, beautiful life with me." 2 years later, Ryan stood in the audience at a humanitarian award ceremony, Sophie and Maya on either side of him. On stage, Evelyn was accepting an award for the foundation's work, but she'd insisted on sharing the spotlight. "This award isn't just mine," she said, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium. "It belongs to every survivor who's had the courage to be vulnerable, to every person who's looked at their scars and decided they're worthy of love anyway. To my husband, who showed me what it means to choose someone every single day, and to our daughters, who teach me that family isn't about biology, it's about showing up, even when it's hard." She looked directly at Ryan, and even from across the room, he could see the love and gratitude in her eyes. 5 years ago, I was convinced no one would want me, that my past, my scars, my inability to have biological children made me fundamentally unlovable. But my husband proved me wrong. He looked at all my broken pieces and said, "You're exactly who I've been waiting for." That changed everything. It taught me that we're not defined by what we've lost or what we can't do. We're defined by how we love, how we show up, how we choose hope, even when hope feels impossible. Ryan felt Sophie squeeze his hand on one side, Maya on the other. His daughters, biological and chosen, the family he never imagined having but couldn't picture his life without. So this award is for everyone who's ever felt too damaged to be loved, Evelyn continued. You're not too much or too broken or too scarred. You're exactly enough, exactly as you are. And somewhere out there is someone who will look at you and say what my husband said to me. I'm not leaving. I choose you. The audience erupted in applause. Ryan stood, tears streaming down his face, and mouthed the words he'd said to her in her office years ago, the words that had changed both their lives. I'm not leaving. And from the stage, Evelyn met his eyes and smiled, secure in the knowledge that he never would. After the ceremony, they went home to their apartment, larger now, with room for 2 growing girls and all the chaos that came with family life. Maya was practicing piano in the living room, the notes occasionally hitting wrong keys but improving every day. Sophie was at the kitchen table, working on a science project about genetics and inheritance, asking thoughtful questions about how families were made. Families don't have to share DNA, she explained to her sister. They just have to share love, right, Dad? Right, Ryan confirmed, pulling Evelyn close. That's exactly right. Later that night, after the girls were asleep and the apartment was quiet, Ryan and Evelyn stood on their balcony looking out at the city that had brought them together. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Evelyn asked. If you hadn't spilled that coffee, if I hadn't helped you, if we'd never taken that chance? Sometimes. But then I remember that some things are meant to be. We were both looking for something, even if we didn't know it, and we found each other. You found me, Evelyn corrected. I was hiding. You just refused to let me stay hidden. Because I saw you, the real you, underneath all the armor, and she was worth fighting for. Evelyn turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. I love you, Ryan Hale. Thank you for choosing me, for staying, for showing me that I was worthy of love, scars, and all. I love you too. And Evelyn, I'd choose you again, every single time. They kissed under the stars, 2 people who'd been broken and found healing in each other's arms. Their story hadn't been easy. It had been messy and complicated and sometimes painful, but it had been real. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Inside, their daughters slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and wanted and chosen. Sophie, who'd lost a mother but gained another. Maya, who'd been abandoned but found a family that wouldn't let her go. Both of them proof that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Ryan and Evelyn had started as 2 lonely people, convinced their brokenness disqualified them from happiness. But they'd learned that being broken wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning, the place where light could enter, the foundation for building something stronger than what came before. They'd built an empire together, not of money or success, but of love and trust and vulnerability. A family forged not from perfection, but from the courage to show up, scars and all, and choose each other anyway. And in the quiet moments, when the girls were asleep and the city hummed below them, Ryan would sometimes catch Evelyn's eye and mouth those 3 words that had changed everything. I'm not leaving. And Evelyn, who'd spent so many years believing no one would stay, would smile and mouth back the truth she'd finally learned to believe. I know. Because some promises, when made by the right person at the right time, become the foundation of everything that follows. They become the story you tell your daughters about what love really means, about how being vulnerable isn't weakness, but courage, about how the scars we carry are proof we survived, not proof we're broken. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find someone who looks at your scars and sees beauty, who sees your damage and chooses to stay anyway, who proves every single day that love isn't about being perfect, it's about being perfectly imperfect together. That was what Ryan and Evelyn had built, not a fairy tale, but something better, something real. A love story that began with 2 broken people and became a testament to the power of choosing vulnerability, choosing hope, choosing each other. And that, in the end, was everything, was